Good morning. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a little housekeeping to take care of this morning. We had a lovely event last night for Mr. Ed Berg, and we have to take care of a possible civil violation of a dine and dash. And, I think it was a Mr. Brokaw they had on the receipt. Please get a hold of Chris McBarnes to settle up.
Yes, I shall address that, Mr. President. I'm guilty.
Didn't want to start off the day on a wrong foot.
Right, correct.
Okay, to those watching via Zoom, if you did not send an advance comment sheet prior to the start of the meeting, but would still like to comment on an agenda item, please do one of the following. If you are on Zoom via your computer, you can send a chat to the host with your name and the agenda item you wish to comment on. If you're listening on the phone, you can send an email to wgfvideo@wyo.gov, making sure to include your name, phone number you are calling from, and the agenda item you wish to comment on. Service awards.
Chief Osterman.
Good morning, President Doobie, Commissioners, Director Nesvik. It's my distinct pleasure this morning to start out the agenda with present a service award to Mark Smith. Mark, you want to come on up? It's a service award for 20 years of service, and actually it's almost 21. Now, we're slated to present this at our supervisors meeting in last fall, but we got COVID out, so it's kind of hard to present virtually. So we got Mark here today. Mark started his career in 2003 as a fisheries biologist in Cody. He was in that position for about 10 years. While in that position, Mark was very instrumental on Yellowstone cutthroat trout restoration, shovel-nosed sturgeon work, sauger work, lots of non-game species, native species work. The Cody region is very diverse in the fisheries, and it has a heavy workload. And Mark was very proficient and efficient in his work there and highly respected. Because he was highly respected, he was promoted to assistant management, fisheries management supervisor stationed here in Cheyenne. And he's been in that position since 2012. Mark manages or supervises the northern tier of the state fisheries program. So that's Cody, Sheridan, Lander, Jackson. Kevin Gelwicks is the other assistant that does the southern tier. Mark is one of the most dedicated and innovative employees within the division. Mark's a workhorse for the division. And consequently, because of that, he gets assigned to a lot of committees. And he does very good work. We appreciate his humor and his intellect every day. Mark is an extremely proficient leader. He's highly respected. He's honest. He leads with integrity and hard work and by example. In 2011, Mark was nominated and received the Peer Recognition Award for Cody. And that was because of his teamwork approach, which he still has today. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that he's one of the most accomplished fly fishermen that you ever want to meet. So if you ever need information on where to go, which he routinely gives to the public and our employees, come to Mark. So Mark, appreciate all your hard work and your dedication, your 20 years and your big brain.
We're going to do pictures at the first break for everybody who gets an award. is.
Rick?
Good morning, President Doobie, Director Nevspick, and members of the commission. It's my privilege and honor today to introduce our Shikar Safari Club International Officer of the Year. So each year, Shikar Safari International provides an opportunity for us to recognize one of our outstanding conservation law enforcement officers. And this group of folks that gets recognized each year is really an elite bunch of the best of the best. And it's my honor and privilege to introduce this year's recipient for Wyoming, our South Pinedale Game Warden, Jordan Kraft. Jordan, if we can have you come up. So Jordan began his game and fish career right out of college. And at the time, Jay Lawson was the chief game warden. And Jay spent a lot of time and effort into trying to build a process to find the best possible candidates for our game wardens. And he really had a knack for identifying talent early on in our folks. And Jordan was no exception. When Jordan went through the interview process, Jay recognized right away that Jordan was a high caliber individual with a lot of potential. And Jay said that the only challenge he was going to have was convincing people he was old enough to actually be a Wyoming game warden. and Jay was spot on. Jordan is a very, very talented individual. He has established himself as a well-rounded, well-respected, and hardworking game warden, very deserving of this award. Jordan spent some time as a trainee in various places, a little bit of time in working some of our watercraft work. In 2005, he went to Elk Mountain and served as the Elk Mountain game warden. And then in 2010, he took the opportunity to transfer to our South Pinedale game warden district and has served there ever since. That South Pinedale Game Warden District, as Director Nesbitt can attest to, is a pretty diverse place. Everything from 13,000 foot Temple Peak in the Big Sandy River down to Farson and big expanses of high desert sagebrush in between. And a lot of diversity of habitats in that district and a rich diversity of wildlife. And Jordan is an ideal fit for that district because he has a diversity of skills and interests, and he pays attention to everything that's out there. He willingly participates in sage grouse lek surveys, burrowing owl surveys, big game surveys. You can find Jordan in the summer and the fall in the backcountry, checking hunters and anglers. Jordan's a very accomplished backcountry horseman and well suited for that district. One of the things that really stands out about Jordan is he has an ability to build long-lasting relationships. He operates with integrity. Folks really enjoy being around him. He has a great teamwork attitude. You really would be hard pressed to find anybody that would say anything negative about him, except folks who come out to our winter ranges and try to poach some of our world-class mule deer. And Jordan has a reputation for being very tenacious and meticulous in his investigations, and has made a number of high-profile cases involving our winter range mule deer. Again, that's a world-class resource, and we have a world-class officer to help protect that. Well, I just want to highlight one case in particular. I think it's referred to as the Copenhagen killer case. Jordan really didn't have a lot of evidence to go on, except for a can of Copenhagen and an empty Monster energy drink can. And using that little bit of evidence, he, working with a team with his fellow game wardens, was able to string together enough evidence to find the culprit and bring somebody to justice. So for all these reasons, Jordan, again, is very well deserving of this award, and it's an honor and a privilege to present this to him today. Congratulations.
I could just briefly, President, Commissioner, members of the commission, Director Nesvik, it truly is an honor to represent this department and the constituents and the wildlife of the state. And it's very humbling to be recognized amongst such dedicated and talented coworkers. So thank you.
Well done.
Chief Phipps.
President Doobie, members of the commission, Director Nesvik. It's my honor and privilege today to bring to the commission's attention a long, steadfast, loyal employee with the department. I don't have any prepared remarks today, and there's a reason for that. Jody has been a very quiet, diligent worker in the department, in the fiscal department, helping to flow money in support of the rest of the department. And she doesn't hit the spotlight and hasn't really hit the spotlight in 45 years of service. Tomorrow is her last day of employment with the department, and I convinced her at the 11th hour of the executive session to get her in front of you so that we could congratulate her on 45 years of service and her retirement that begins tomorrow.
Sorry, I'm not a talker, but I'll kind of go from here. Probably in the 45 years I've worked, the hardest part was going through COVID. I was born and raised around LaGrange. My dad put in water lines and we worked 12, 14 hours a day. You got paid $50 regardless. So it was hard for me to work at home and not finish everything I took home. But I did it. I found out that I can still stay married. That was a big question, but I've enjoyed a lot of people, seen a lot of people come and go, and appreciate everything everybody's done for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Nesvik. Just going to give you a brief update on the progress of the Cody Regional Office project and presentation on the North Glendo Bureau of Reclamation property transfer. The Cody Regional Office is currently underway. As you know, construction is going well. Wanted to remind the commission that at the previous meeting, you approved to extend the substantial completion date to July 29th. Everything that we've been shown so far is indicating that that will be on track. Again, construction is going well. The contractor is currently working on interior insulation, hanging sheetrock on the first floor, and nearly all the exterior windows have been completed. They're also working on all the doors right now. So the building is pretty much enclosed at this point, and I've included a few photos just to give you a quick update on the visual. Here's a photo of the front of the building. You can see the main entryway and the garage doors for the attached shop. This is from the rear of the building with the conference room. The cold storage facility would be to your right on the photo. Kind of an interior of how they're moving along on the inside of the structure at this point. This would be the conference room. And then one of the hallways, just to give you an idea how far along they are with ductwork, interior construction and so forth. So they're moving right along.
See any of the sticky notes that Dan Smith's, everybody's taking dibs on their rooms.
So with that, if there's no questions, I will move on to the North Glendale presentation.
Any questions?
Good progress.
Thank you. So this project is an opportunity that the Bureau of Reclamation has worked with the department on so far. The Bureau of Reclamation owns or controls a little over 2,500 acres on the north end of Glendo that they have identified as a potential transfer to the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. Currently, the department manages a pheasant hunt there annually, where we release birds and give hunters an opportunity to harvest those pheasants, similar to the Springer permission slip that we offer every year. BOR has an interest in transferring 4 areas that we've identified as the Byron Wilson area, the North Elkhorn Bay area. There's a portion of that property that we consider the ag lease, and the North Shore. So again, that property is approximately 2,562 acres. So these areas provide habitat for a wide variety of wildlife, both game and non-game species. There's hunting opportunities for not only pheasants, but deer, turkey, and waterfowl. Opportunity to improve the habitat with potential transfer to the Game and Fish Commission exists through weed control and willow stand control, among other things, including irrigation. Here's a map of that area. And if you're familiar with the Glendo Reservoir, North Elkhorn Bay, as they're calling it, is in this area here, with that boat ramp at Elkhorn being down here on the south end of that map. So the areas that we're discussing are up all along this northern canyon area, and is the area where the department releases pheasants on an annual basis. So again, wanted to cover this agricultural lease too. There's a 211 acres that they consider the ag lease portion. There's currently a lessee on that property. That includes 3.73 CFS of territorial water right that would transfer with that property to the commission. So there would be enough water there to provide irrigation to that section of the property that would go a long way toward enhancing the habitat there. And again, there's a multitude of wildlife and fishing opportunities, obviously recreation, that would go along with this transfer or potential transfer. The department has evaluated this project or potential project for what we could do to enhance this and make this better for the hunting public. And we feel that a transfer to the Game and Fish Commission at this point would be a good way to enhance that area and make it better for all those involved. Just to give you a little bit of an update on the process for this, the Bureau of Reclamation owns this property outright. So therefore they would provide an application to the GSA that they would review, and they have a 6-month time frame to do so. So if the commission were to approve a transfer, we are looking at early fall, sometime in September, likely that a transfer would take place.
Yeah, and I would add, Mr. President, that, this is something, there's been discussions around this for a lot of years. And frankly, up until recently, the Bureau of Reclamation's ask of the Game and Fish Commission was, we're not in the, this is their statement to us, is we're not really in the business of managing for access and recreation and wildlife habitat. We're water managers, and we'd like you to just kind of take over the management of this. And we've, in the past, rejected that, because we would basically have the opportunity to do some improvements under a management agreement, but we'd still be tied to all the federal requirements with NEPA and still even, be subject to the unpredictability of us not owning the land. And so this last time they approached me about this, I said, hey, if you will figure out a way to transfer the fee title deed to the commission, we'll ask the commission to look at this. And I think it's a good project. You know, the one thing that Sean outlined some of the things that we would gain more flexibility to do things with habitat. There is a lot of access here. It's already being used. We would, it's important for the commission to note, have to take on paying the taxes on this. As you guys all know, the commission does pay taxes on fee title lands that we own. But really, at the end of the day, you know, that's probably the only drawback there, you know, depending on what projects we decided to take on and what we decided to do with the existing travel management plan. There might be some additional resources and workload there, but I think at the end of the day, this is a good project.
Questions? Any questions for? It doesn't seem like it's on. There we go. Any questions for
I do have a question, Mr. President.
Commissioner Ladwig?
Go ahead.
How does this interact with Glendale State Park?
Mr. President, Commissioner Ladwig, this would be in addition to what's going on with Glendale State Park. And we've had preliminary discussions with State Parks personnel on cooperatively managing the property to a certain extent. There would be opportunities for expanded camping and some other things that State Parks would have a potential opportunity to manage. And we would work with them cooperatively to look at some opportunities there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brokaw?
Question and statement, I guess, for Sean. Sean, the ag lease portion with that water right, what do they currently use that water right for? Is it irrigated pasture or?
Mr. President, Commissioner Brokaw, my understanding is that property has been intermittently irrigated over the years. The lessee doesn't currently have any infrastructure out there, to my knowledge, at this point. So there's opportunity there to develop that into a more productive piece of ground.
Okay, I think it's a good project and I'd like to see that and continue a grazing lease on that where we could enhance that.
Yeah, there has been some irrigation in the past. I don't know what delivery method was used. It's been farmed before, going back, you know, a couple decades. So the opportunity exists. The other thing I wanted to mention to Commissioner Ladwig's point was, you know, we actually had the discussion too about whether, you know, who's the best entity to transfer this property to, if it's going from federal to state hands. Is it State Parks or is it Game and Fish? And at the end of the day, where I landed was, you know, in order for the state parks to do something like this, they have a statutorily directed process that's quite lengthy. It requires a whole bunch of outreach and then a legislative process. And frankly, this wouldn't get done for a long time. It wouldn't be high on their priority list. And so I think it's better for us to have fee title and then to work out management agreements with state parks so that they can kind of take care of the stuff they're good at and we can take care of the stuff we're good at.
I'd agree. Mr. President.
No, I won't say it. I was going to say something, but I won't. Any more questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion.
I so move. Follow the department's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Moved by Commissioner Brokaw, second by Commissioner Ladwig to approve the North Glendale land transfer. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Deputy Chief Brimmeyer.
Well, I'm not Deputy Chief Brimmeyer. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Darrell Lutz. I'm the Wildlife Management Coordinator in Lander. Commissioner Doobie, Director Nesbitt, and members of the commission, thank you for having me today to give you an update where the Lander region and the department's at with the assessment that we've conducted with the idea to reintroduce bighorn sheep into the Sweetwater Rocks. I'll remind this body that you gave the department direction to do this assessment after a request was made by the Pathfinder Ranch at your July commission meeting. This isn't the first time we've been here. This is the fourth time that we've considered this idea, dating back as far as 1987. But let me go back a little bit further in time just to give you a little bit of background about bighorn sheep in this part of Wyoming. Bighorn sheep are endemic to the Sweetwater Rocks. They were there, we think, a subspecies that we often refer to as Auduboni, pre-European man. They probably went extinct in the Sweetwater Rocks and the other low elevation mountain ranges in Wyoming around the turn of the century. We think around 1907 to be specific. After they disappeared, the department in the 1940s decided it would be a good idea to try to reintroduce them into the Sweetwater Rocks in the early 1940s. And interestingly enough, we didn't reintroduce bighorn sheep into the Sweetwater Rocks. We tried desert sheep, amazingly enough. We got 7 of them from Nevada and put them in the rocks in 1942. Lo and behold, they didn't stick. They didn't do well. Wasn't the right place for desert bighorn sheep. Can you imagine coming from Nevada and warm temperatures and to that climate in the rocks? So they didn't make it. And then we tried 2 more times in 1949 and then again in 1950 with bighorn sheep. Learned our lesson, but bighorn sheep from the Whiskey Mountain herd unit. And they stuck around for a while. They were last seen around in the rocks until about the early 1980s. And then were only sporadically seen after that. So in 1987, the department, in cooperation with the Bureau of Land Management, brought forward a proposal to reintroduce bighorn sheep there once again. But it was decided that given the previous failures, at least in terms of bighorn sheep survival, that an assessment, a more in-depth assessment needed to be conducted with regard to habitat suitability. That was conducted by the BLM. It was a really thorough assessment, lasted over a period of a couple of years. And it was determined by the BLM at that time that it was a suitable place for sheep to re-inhabit. And we, again, in cooperation with the BLM, brought it to the public, took it to the landowners, and the idea was abandoned for many of the reasons that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. And then again, the department made similar proposals, went to the public again in 1999, and then again in 2014. Every time, each of the 3 times, and including this time, the same concerns were brought up. So where are we at today? Well, we know bighorn sheep were there in the past. We knew that the BLM, with their assessment, we agreed with it, that the rocks were a suitable place to put sheep. We contracted with the University of Wyoming, in particular the Hobbs School and Kevin Monteith's shop, to do another habitat assessment, so that we had an independent evaluation whether or not, given today's conditions, that sheep would still be a suitable species in this part of Wyoming. And based on their assessment, and it was very thorough, well done, of course, as we would expect, we still believe, based on that quantitative analysis, that it is suitable habitat for bighorn sheep. In addition, they also did what we refer to as a risk of contact analysis. And that analysis is simply, what's the risk of bighorn sheep intermingling or mingling with domestic sheep? Because we know domestic sheep harbor some or many of the pathogens that cause pneumonia and all age die-offs in bighorn sheep. And based on their assessment, the risk of contact, if we were to put bighorn sheep in the rocks, is less or similar to that what it is in the Ferris-Seminole herd unit, where bighorn sheep are thriving. So based on their assessment, we believe, or we think, that the risk of contact is acceptable to the department, given some caveats that we'll talk about in a minute. One of the most important aspects of doing this assessment was adherence to this. And this is the statewide bighorn sheep, domestic sheep interaction working group plan. which is codified in state statute. So we got to follow it. And it's a good plan. It outlines a rigorous step-by-step process that needs to be adhered to as we go through any kind of assessment of this sort. And the reason for that is because this part of Wyoming is referred to as a cooperative review area. That polygon that you're seeing on that map, mostly shaded in yellow, though it expands beyond that a little bit, is a cooperative review area. And by definition, a cooperative review area requires that any change to bighorn sheep management or domestic sheep management needs to be evaluated by this interaction working group that meets once a year. So the appendix that outlines the process that we go through, of course, includes a rigorous public review process. And let me just say that regardless of this plan or state statute, the department in 99 and in 2014 we did that then, and we would have done that kind of public review anyway. So the public review process that we undertook involved 2 sets of meetings in Jeffrey City and Lander in early November, and then again in early December. We went back to both of those communities. And let me just say that in summary, based upon our public process, there is broad public support for the idea of having sheep back in the rocks. But there's also grave and legitimate concern amongst landowners and livestock producers that it could impact their ability to graze livestock on public lands, on their public land leases. And they're legitimate concerns, as we've learned. We've learned a lot over the past few months, I think it's fair to say. The BLM has a policy that was instituted in 2016. It's called number 1730. And what it does is it basically outlines the requirements that the BLM has to follow to provide separation between domestic sheep and bighorn sheep. And believe me, that's not lost on any of the landowners who this may affect, nor the department. Because the BLM and other federal agencies like the Forest Service have similar requirements to create that separation to protect bighorn sheep. And so the concerns that we heard in the mid 1980s, again in 1999, and then in 2014, and then again this fall, were reiterated by many of the permittees and producers that we talked to. And we've listened. But I also want to tell you that of the landowners that we talked to in August and September, they're like all the other landowners across the state, or most. They're supportive of wildlife. Many love bighorn sheep and would like the idea of seeing them, but they're concerned about the impacts that having bighorn sheep may have on their livelihoods. But as you heard in July, there's also a contingent of landowners in this portion of Wyoming that are very supportive. There's 2 primary landowners that have a significant portion of this area that, one, were the proponent of the project that, of course, presented to you in July, and a neighboring landowner that's just as supportive. So please know that while there is landowner concern and opposition to this idea, there's also support. What's the opposition? What are the concerns based on? And there's several, but primarily landowner concerns, livestock producers' concerns are that if bighorn sheep are put there, then the BLM would either have to, per their policy, have to provide the separation between domestic sheep and bighorn sheep. The nearest domestic sheep allotment that's active is a little over 10 miles from that northwest boundary of that yellow polygon that you see on the map. And again, the risk of contact, as we've as we understand it, is acceptable. We think, we don't think that's an issue. But regardless, the BOM, because of their policy, would perhaps have to provide other measures to create that separation. And let me assure you that if you read 1730, I think you'll agree with me that that responsibility or the ways to create that separation fall literally at the doorsteps of livestock producers. It would impact them. Other concerns that they brought up are, you know, as you would expect, predation, and I think Commissioner Byrd brought that up in July. We hear that a lot, and it too is a legitimate concern. Competition for forage with, you know, domestic livestock and et cetera. But the primary concern is, again, the potential for impact on permittees and their ability to continue to graze livestock on public land. So at our first set of public meetings, I reported to the folks that showed up in Jeffrey City and Lander that about half the landowners supported the idea, with the caveat that we needed to figure out how to ensure or provide assurances that it wouldn't have any impact on their operations. So then we walked away from that. We developed some more information and some other ideas and started thinking more about what a reintroduction might look like, and went back to them and again in early December, both in Jeffrey City and Lander. And let me just tell you that the landowners, from the time that we met with them in December and got back to them in December, most of the landowners that we talked to, other than the proponents and the other landowner that I brought up, had changed their mind. They were in opposition. So as it stands today, again, I just emphasize that the landowners, most that we talked to, are opposing the idea. But again, they would, I think, tell you that their primary concern is this notion or concern that their livestock permits on their public land grazing allotments could be affected.
Daryl? And to be clear, they could lose the ability to graze numbers, AUMs, they could lose, as well as the ability to graze, period.
Yeah, I think that both of those statements are accurate, given what's happened in other parts of the West. So there is unknown impacts. So thanks for the question, and thanks for allowing me to clarify that. So where are we at today? And the other thing I need to mention is that as part of the Interaction Working Group's plan and state statute, that we also met with the Interaction Working Group on November 2nd, and the entire day was committed or dedicated to discussing this topic. And it was agreed amongst the Interaction Working Group that the concerns are legitimate, and they are legitimate. Please know that. And so what that Interaction Working Group decided to do was appoint a subcommittee to work further and see if there's a way that the Game and Fish Department and the federal agency, the BLM, could work together with the Interaction Working Group, the wool growers, the livestock board, and Wyoming Department of Ag, and figure out a way, is there a way that we can provide assurances to landowners that if bighorn sheep were put there, they wouldn't be impacted. So we're working in that direction. It was our hope that if everything had gone well, we would be doing a transplant within the next month or two. That was our hope. We're slowing the process down. We want to see if there's opportunity, if there's ways to provide, either in changes to policy at the federal level or what have you, to provide assurances to permittees and livestock producers that they would not be impacted. I need to add here that Director Nesvik attempted to address their concerns. He sent each of those landowners and the wool growers and the livestock board a letter, and basically said in that letter, help me here, Director Nesvik, if I get this wrong, but the bottom line was that if bighorn sheep were used in any way as a lever or conduit to cause livestock producers any harm, that the department would take it upon ourselves to remove them. That's not unprecedented, though we've never done it, but that was also done, I think, by state statute in the Sierra Madres a few years ago. And I want to emphasize that even the interaction working group and the landowners that we're working with, and they're good people, as most of are. Some aren't.
Gotta be one in every crowd.
That's right. But they emphasize that they appreciated Director Nesvik's letter, but they recognized their issue wasn't with the department. Their concerns aren't with the department. There's trust there, but there's not with the BLM. And I think if the BLM were in the room, and I don't see any, I think they would agree that there is cause for concern and cause for a need to address their concerns, because it is unknown what would happen. So with that, what we did is we put together what we're calling a conceptual proposal. And that conceptual proposal is what I wanted to use this map for. Let me see if I can do this. So just to orient you. So for those of you that aren't familiar, am I okay turning around a little bit? Can everybody hear okay? This is Highway 220 from Casper. Alcova Reservoir sits right about there. That's the junction of 220 and the Dry Creek Road. That's Muddy Gap. That's Jeffrey City. This is what we call the Hall or the Ore Road. And then this is a line that was drawn by the Interaction Working Group right here that outlines the cooperative review area. So it extends beyond what I'm calling, if bighorn sheep were put here, the management area. This is encompassed in the red line by an existing herd unit and hunt area boundary. So it has been a herd unit and a hunt area for the department up until through the 1980s. So why is this important? Well, the nearest domestic bighorn sheep or domestic sheep allotment that's active is in this Muskrat Basin area, which is right in here. Then there are several allotments on the north slope of what we call the Rattlesnake Range. And then there is a large active allotment just to the south of Highway 287 and an inactive allotment right in here. So how can we say that the risk of contact be acceptable to the department, knowing that there's an active allotment adjacent and an inactive allotment that could be active? How can we say it'd be acceptable? And what our idea is that, and we've proven that we can do this with Devil's Canyon, we can keep sheep where we want them. Granted, it'll take some effort and department time to do it, but it's our conceptual proposal that if sheep were to be put here, that they would be kept within the confines of what we're referring to as the management areas you see outlined in this polygon. But I don't think we can get anywhere, and that's why we're slowing the process down, until we have the opportunity to meet with our BLM partners and try to develop these assurances for the permittees in this area. And with that, Director Nesvik, do you want to address where we're at with some of that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Daryl did a great job of kind of highlighting a whole lot of work from the team over the last several months since we last talked to you about this in July. You know, at the end of the day, I think we've got to look outside the box. Daryl hit the nail on the head. If we're able to identify assurances that the producers can get comfortable with, I think this very worthy project goes forward. And I think that short of having those assurances, I think it's a bad idea for us to go in there if we can't find a way to as Daryl said, satisfy some justified concerns. Now, that said, the BLM's supportive of this. The BLM thinks it's a great project. The BLM is not, I believe them when they say they have no intentions of trying to in any way use bighorn sheep as any kind of leverage against curtailing domestic sheep grazing. But as Daryl highlighted, that doesn't really go anywhere with the sheep producers that are close to this cooperative review area, because there just isn't a level of trust there. And there are some case examples, not as many in Wyoming. I'm not sure if I know of any in Wyoming other than the far southwest corner of the state, where, through a series of events over a lot of years, domestic sheep producers are now in a tough spot and are losing their abilities to graze. So where are we at? And where we're at is I told you, I think it's going to take some kind of a nuanced approach, some kind of out of the box thinking here. I've talked to the national director of the BLM. I've talked to the senior people, undersecretaries in the Department of Interior, and so far haven't gotten any great solutions from them. And so what we've decided to do is to take some lawyers, both government lawyers as well as folks that aren't involved in this issue, that have some natural resource experience, great legal minds, put them in a room and throw all this at them and say, what are some things we haven't thought about here? What is some kind of cool new idea that would be legally defensible? That's a key part of this. Legally defensible to move this thing forward. That happens on February 8th. We are also inviting the stakeholder groups that have been most engaged in this to come and kind of witness and be a part of that conversation. We'll have wool growers, stock growers, wild sheep, all sitting there when we do this. We've actually got a BLM solicitor that will be in the room that will hopefully be able to help us. And so that's kind of our next step, is what can we do? What kind of Pathfinder ranches, I didn't mention them, they'll be at the table. What kind of an idea can we find here? There have been some great conservation success stories in the past with looking outside the box. I mean, the whole 10J exception to the Endangered Species Act and the way that's been applied in different places has been a great conservation tool, where you can take and reintroduce black-footed ferrets into an area and guarantee landowners that there's not going to be any negative impacts on landowners. And so I believe there's a way, but it's going to take some legal minds to help us get there, and some out of the box thinking. And so that's what our hope is to come out of that with, we may have to go through the NEPA process. I think that's something that could definitely be on the table. Maybe there's something that could come out of NEPA that would prescribe a change to the policy. I just don't know what exactly the solution is, but I think there is one out there somewhere. We just got to go find it. So, and I do want to thank Daryl and Jason Hunter and the whole Lander region, all of the stakeholders that have been involved. There's been a lot of them. They've done a lot of work to try to get us to this point where we're at now. It's been reviewed and analyzed quite well.
Any questions for Daryl? We do have a blue sheet. Katie Cheeseborough.
Good morning, President Doobie, Director Nesvik, members of the commission. First of all, I just want to apologize. There's something about the formality of this that makes me very nervous, as well as how important this topic is to me personally and to the organization that I represent. I'm Katie Cheeseborough. I'm the director of the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you guys today. And I wanted to share my appreciation with the commission for directing the department to move forward with an analysis of the Sweetwater Rocks bighorn sheep reintroduction. I think this is an amazing opportunity, and I think the department has taken your direction and done an amazing job. They have followed the Wyoming plan as discussed by Daryl to a T. They have engaged a variety of stakeholders, landowners, and the public in every way possible, and put in a lot of work in a lot of ways. And the analysis that came out with the habitat assessment and risk of contact analysis from Kevin Monteith's shop was really excellent as well. So thank you for making that direction, and bravo to the department for doing a great job. One thing I wanted to mention, it sounded kind of negative, girl. So I want to put a little more positive spin on this from my perspective as somebody who's been at the table with the interaction working group this whole time. This is something that's important to the department. It's important to us, and it is extremely important to the agricultural community. And the way this Wyoming plan was put forward was so that we could all work together to come to reasonable outcomes that we can, if not be happy with, live with. And this is one of the first opportunities we've had to go through a cooperative review together and in a reintroduction. So not a supplemental introduction, but a brand new reintroduction. And it brought up a lot of new things and a lot of new ideas and a lot of great conversation. And I just want to point out that not only, the Game and Fish put forward some proposals of how we could have a mechanism of separation that wasn't just the onus of the landowner, the BLM, how the Game and Fish could partake in that. Some novel ideas were removal by the Department of Bighorn sheep, issuing a Chapter 56 to sheep producers in the area so that if a bighorn sheep came out of that management area, they could be removed. We've got great technology now, GPS collars with geofencing technology. So if, bighorn sheep crossed that boundary, we'd be alerted right away. So great ideas that were thrown out there. We talked about what's an acceptable risk of contact a little bit. We haven't nailed that down, but as Daryl and Director Nesvik said, we focused on providing assurances to the livestock operators that wouldn't detract from their livestock operations. And the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation is committed to that. We're committed to making sure that we can come up with something that works for everyone. I guess my concern would be that if we can't do this correctly and do it slowly and do it right, that we lose all ability to do a cooperative review across the state in the future. And I think I'm very grateful to the department for doing that slowly and correctly and talking to the landowners, not just in the area, but across the state, and taking the time to do this the right way. It's slow, it's painful, it might require NEPA, but what my hope is for finding these assurances that if we can do this, this is a benefit to livestock operators across the state, and for more than just sheep reintroductions, but for any wildlife management action. There is room in that BLM manual 1730 to do things specific to our state. And our state is special in lots of ways, as we all know, but our bighorn sheep management is special here. That Wyoming plan is unique to us, and therefore I feel like our federal partners should work with us as a state to work with the landowners, the operators, the wildlife advocates. And so far, so good. I think it's going really well. Yes, we've taken a step back. The other thing I wanted to mention, Daryl mentioned the landowner opposition at some of those public meetings. And, I was listening and heard feedback and heard, there was a little more opposition in that later meeting. But I think the opposition isn't necessarily to the reintroduction. It's fear that something could happen, potentially happen. And that's what we're trying to alleviate with these assurances. And I want to make the point too, that the landowner opposition, if you were to take that polygon that Daryl had on the screen and do a GIS exercise with the landowners in and around that area and the lessees or permittees of the federal lands in and around that area, and you looked at a percentage of land owned and leased by supporters, there would be very little opposition there. So keep that in mind as well. So thank you guys for all that you've done in directing the department forward. And I just ask that you keep considering moving this forward to come up with novel ways to, live in this state and support agriculture and support wildlife at the same time. You guys do a great job of that. And I just ask that you continue considering that. So thank you so much.
Any questions for Kay? Any other comments from the public?
Mr. President, I guess I'm
Commissioner Byrd?
just curious. So we get all this done, all the assurances. What's changed now that will make the transplant successful? over the last couple times? I mean, what's different out there in the Sweetwater Rocks that we think if we get them there, they're gonna survive this time?
Yeah, Commissioner Byrd, Commission President Doobie, Director Nesvik, if I understand your question right, I don't think anything's changed in terms of habitat suitability, nor in terms of risk of contact compared to that what we saw in 1999 or 2014. Am I missing your point?
So I think, I don't want to speak for her, but it's more like, so what's changed? So why will it work now?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Doug.
Third time a charm, or, I mean, do we
Yeah,
just
no,
keep
no,
going
no, no,
till
no, no.
we
Fourth
figure it
time
out?
is a
I
charm.
don't know.
Yeah, no, great question. I get it. So in the past, it has been bighorn sheep from Whiskey Mountain. And of course, bighorn sheep from there are migratory animals. They tend to lamb later, around the 1st of June. And just as we have seen with the transplants to the Ferris and Seminole Mountains, which are of course adjacent to this and very similar in terms of habitat type, elevation, forage type that's available to them, and et cetera. These sheep that we're bringing from Devil's Canyon, which came from Oregon and Montana, are non-migratory. They lamb much earlier, on average about 3 weeks, and are more suitable to more shrubs in their diet. And so just as in the Ferris and Seminole, these sheep have done real well, right, Doug? We think they would do the same in the Sweetwater Rock. So it's a different, they're still bighorn sheep. They're Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. They're just non-migratory and early lambing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Daryl, I think that's an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I agree. I'd love to see sheep in the Sweetwater Rocks, but not at the expense of our partnership with landowners. We have to take that seriously, and I appreciate slowing it down, make sure we do it right.
Yeah, and
Well, the department, it's great that Director Nesbitt said, we'll get those sheep out of there. I just soon not put them in there unless we can make it all work together.
And I appreciate your comment, Commissioner President Doobie, and to Katie's comment about sounding a little bit negative. I wish you hadn't said that, because I know that's what Director Nesbitt was saying too. So I've heard it from him before. But I think it's just important that you understand that landowners do have a legitimate concern, and we're working damn hard to try to work through that and provide those assurances. So I just want to make sure you guys are on the playing field, knowing exactly what they're saying and feeling, and that it is legitimate. So, but if at the end of the day, we can provide these assurances, get those permittees comfortable with the idea, it would be my recommendation and our Lander Region recommendation to do the reintroduction. It is an appropriate place for this species because they've been there before. It'd be neat. So I'm ending on a positive note.
You were just being realistic.
Okay, thank you. John? Don't look like John.
Change. Mr. President Doobie, Commissioners, Director Nesbitt, our next presenter will be John Lund, Jackson or Pinedale Region Supervisor. He'll be providing an update on our feed ground public process that what's been completed since I updated you in April in Jackson. But before I do, I just want to say it's been an honor leading this group, and that leadership has now been turned over to Brad Hovengay, the Jackson Supervisor, and John, and we have complete confidence that they will successfully carry this on to completion. So, John.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Commission, Director Nesbitt. I'm just going to provide a quick update on primarily phase 2 of this elk feed ground process that we've been going through in Western Wyoming. As a quick review, I think you're all aware phase 1 was a process that started well over a year ago, where we did several online Zoom type general informational presentations about feed grounds, everything related to feed grounds. And from there, we created a list of, or a group of stakeholders that were interested in the process. And so phase 2 was a process. We are in week 11 of phase 2, which has been, the entire process of phase 2 has been what we've termed as a shared learning process, where we have been providing information on specific topics to these stakeholder groups. And these topics came from questions that arose from phase 1. And so we've just, last week was week 11. Next week will be the final week of that final presentation of week 12. Some of those topics that we covered, we started off in November, with the stakeholder groups. With phase 2, we did an overview of just the complexities of the entire process and feed ground program. Talked about some social and political factors, and then we really focused on wildlife diseases. That meeting was the stakeholders in person in one group in Pinedale, as well as an online virtual option for those that couldn't attend. We continued the next week with some more disease work. Following that, we had a presentation on the role of federal partners. So we had our federal agencies. They presented some information to these stakeholder groups. We talked about, provided some information on other states, management and policies on how they deal with feeding elk on some states that do. Had a discussion on winter range and land use, impacts of feed ground management on elk and other wildlife populations. That was just that was one of our latest ones. And some information on economic and tourism impacts to feed grounds. And then finally, February 1st, next week, we'll conclude phase 2 as far as shared learning processes with a discussion on management trade-offs and implications on feed grounds. And so if you take action A, what the results could be this and whatnot. So everything we do, what could be the effects of that? So we're gonna have that discussion and kind of bring back and review all of the complexities that go with every single feed ground decision and action that we take there. So that'll be next week. Again, that one will be in person in Pinedale. And again, there'll be a virtual option for those that can't attend. And following that presentation that day, we're going to break out into stakeholder groups and start that next process. And so like I said, that'll be week 12. The next phase will be, that's been so far, it's been us presenting information to the stakeholders. And that starting next week, we're going to get to those stakeholder groups, and now it's time for us to listen to them. And we'll be collecting input and getting their concerns and ideas and whatnot. And that process will continue on for a while in the future. I left out something here I wanted to talk about. So in these shared learning process presentations, the attendance has been very good. For those that couldn't make some of the presentations we did were live. Lots of them were recordings that they could get online and watch after the fact. People, if they missed the live ones, they could go back and watch a recording of it later. And so that participation has been pretty good. So anyway, timeline moving forward. Like I said, now's the time we're going to start getting with our individual stakeholder groups, collecting input and ideas from them to move on with this process. And within our steering group, we've got several members throughout the Jackson and Pinedale regions that are on this steering group. We've split up our duties to where individual steering group members will be focusing on individual stakeholder groups. And so we'll be meeting with those groups kind of one-on-one and collecting as much input as we can from them. Once we get as much of that as possible, we'll eventually start writing an actual draft management plan for these feed grounds. And that will be, utilizing the input that we've gained from the stakeholder groups and the stakeholder meetings. Once we get a plan developed, a draft plan, we'll bring it back to the stakeholders, get some more input, comments, concerns from them. Ultimately, we'll come up with a plan that we're ready to deliver to the public. And with that, we'll start the public process just like we would with any kind of management plan, any kind of regulation type of, public meetings throughout the state and whatnot. Once that input's collected, we will work on a final draft of this plan. And hopefully, if all goes well, we will be presenting that plan to you early in 2023. That's our timeline. That's what we're shooting for. We've been dealing with things like COVID and whatnot, and changing from in-person to virtual and throughout the process, but we've been making it work, and it's been working pretty well. So I'm confident we'll be able to stick to that timeline. But that's a quick overview. I knew I flew through that pretty quick. Overall, I feel like the process is going pretty well. Public has, or the stakeholder groups have been pretty interactive, even though, like I said, it's been for this process that we've just gone through, it's been pretty much us passing on information to them. But they've had lots of questions and comments. And one thing I left out was after each week, after each of these presentations, whether it was recorded or if it was live, typically on that Friday of that week, we held a live Q&A session on Zoom. And those have been really productive. We've got a lot of good questions and comments on those. And so with that, we're moving on, and so far things are going well. I take any questions.
Thanks, John. Do you have any observations you can share with us about the process and some of the things that may have come up that you didn't think of, or?
I think the one thing that's been very and we knew it coming in, is that the public is very passionate about this process and about the feed ground concept and whatnot. And so there's some of the main concerns that come out of receiving the question and answer sessions and whatnot. And at the very beginning, obviously diseases are a concern. Questions on, the impacts of those diseases and whatnot. We have that side. We also have on the other side concerns and a lot of questions and comments and that concern that we may potentially go overboard and shut feed grounds off completely and lose elk numbers and things like that. So it's been a balancing act there. Those are the two major observations I've seen, and again, they're not surprises. Within that, polarized group, people have been extremely respectful throughout the whole process. I think that's going to continue. As far as, I can't remember the second part of your question or okay. So,
President Doobie, Robert, in fashion, I think that Supervisor Lund and Supervisor Hoven he's being very modest to what they're doing. I've been kind of like the fly on the wall through this whole process, and I can assure this commission and I can assure the public that this is a meticulous process that these folks are going through. They are not, there is, if you ever go into one of the Zoom meetings or whenever to listen to it, they are absolutely, there's no rock unturned. They are absolutely taking it like the Director Nesbitt said, they've taken it from absolutely scratch, and they're starting to try to build up for the state and the department and everything. So I could assure that it's been a very fascinating process, and we're in very good hands with the way they're carrying it out. So he's being very modest because in his true fashion, but they have so much work that they're doing in this. So I sure appreciate it.
We appreciate you monitoring that.
Yeah.
Mr. President, Commissioner Roberts, Director Nesbitt, one thing responding to that too is that within our stakeholder, within our steering team, we have an incredible amount of diverse talent on there, through whether it's game wardens, our disease biologists. So there's people, none of us know everything, but there's somebody within the group that does. And so that's been huge for us. And it's been interesting. One thing I forgot to mention is that all of these presentations that we've done, all of the phase 1 general information presentations, those are all on our website. We've got a feed grounds page on the website. And if you haven't looked at them and you have some time, it can be files.
Any more questions or comments? Any from the public? Okay, thanks. I think we'll take 15 minutes, reconvene. Unless you have something else.
The award, we need the
Yeah, the
award,
award, I was gonna say.
awardees to go over here for pictures or wherever Robin tells us to.
Okay, we're gonna, little departure from the agenda. We have a presentation by Lanny Applegate and crew.
Mr. President, Commissioners,
I'm Lanny Applegate with the Wyoming Fire Service. And with me is Mark Young, who's a Deputy State Fire Marshal, and Byron Matthews with Cheyenne Fire Department, and Dan Johnson with Laramie Fire Department. And they're going to talk to you. We got a couple of awards we would like to present to a couple of commissioners. And so with that, I'm going to step to the side and let somebody knows what they're talking about talk. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Commissioners and Director Nesbitt, thank you for the opportunity to butt in here. All right. What we want to do is real quickly, we'd like to give thanks to the general support from the past support from the commission in regards to Wyoming Last Team. If you haven't heard of the Wyoming Last Team, if it's okay, I'm just going to put a stack of information here. This is just a brief overview of the team and some activities reports at the end for each of you to look at. Wyoming Last is a team, a volunteer team put together of multidisciplinary folks across the state in public safety. We have firefighters, law enforcement, emergency management, EMTs, the general public who serve on this volunteer team to provide direct services to families of firefighters, law enforcement, game and fish, EMTs, all search and rescue officers across the state who either die in the line of duty or are active members killed non-line of duty or retired members of all those disciplines. So we are a team that comes together upon request by family and agencies. We operate in the background and we do whatever we can do to manage that incident, whether it's a line of duty death, funeral, memorial service, procession, reception. I call it the whole enchilada or nothing at all, everywhere in between. It's up to the family. It's all family driven. And we'll hit the ground running and we'll work with that agency, and then we'll be in the background and we'll put on and do everything for the family and the department and provide the honor and dignity and respect due to that fallen officer. For example, we did a retire. We supported Mr. Sexton's retired game and fish service in 2021 in Laramie. We helped the family put on that service. And you'll see on the back page a lot of our activity numbers over the last 5 years. And it's all volunteer. So we have been blessed by the fact that some commissioners in the past have stepped up and have graciously donated their hunting tags, the big game hunting tags, and we've been able to go out and sell those. And we've been able to fund the team and its operations with those dollars. And the majority of those operation dollars come from our past hunting tags. So we are here to thank specifically today 2 of those commissioners who have helped us out. Last year, you'll see on that tag just from 2 licenses, we were able to generate about $36,000 between 2 tags. And with an annual operating budget of $10,000, that'll get us by for a few years. So we can't do it without you, literally. We haven't been able to perform this service, and we are super blessed by this. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Dan Johnson, who's a Last Team Coordinator, Fire Chief from Laramie, and we want to thank 2 of your commissioners, past Commissioner Rail and Commissioner Lively.
Hello, thanks for your time this morning. Mark did most all the talking and I get the honor of presenting the plaques. So I really do want to reemphasize that this really means a lot to our organization and our ability to keep functioning. So it's with it's an honor to be able to present and recognize the generous contributions of the former commissioner and current commissioner. So I'd like to call to the front for the first presentation, Dave Rail.
Yep, look that way.
Thank you.
second presentation, I'd like to call up Commissioner Ladwig, Richard Ladwig.
Thanks once again for the moment, and give a shout out to past Commissioner Clouda, who started a lot of this stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thanks for what you do.
Thanks again.
Number 17, Ian.
Good morning, President Doobie, members of the commission, Director Nesvik. Wait for the PowerPoint to catch up. Pleased to be here today to talk to you about 2022 Mule Deer Initiative projects. All right, I think we're there. So quick overview. What is the Mule Deer Initiative? So the Mule Deer Initiative is a grassroots effort undertaken statewide to develop projects addressing local mule deer issues. As you may recall, you've previously allocated $5 million to this effort over a 10-year period. And over the last 6 years, you have approved 59 projects thus far. So thank you for that. We'll circle back to that in the end. Talk a little bit more about what that means. These are the projects that we have for you this year. We've got 10 projects. Really excited about these projects. They span the state. You can see kind of where they're located on that slide. We'll jump right in. Bags Cheatgrass Phase 2. This is within the Bags herd unit. The actual project area is east of Savory Creek. And the goal here is to reduce invasive annual grass infestations within the herd unit, just about 3,000 acres worth. You can see on the map the green polygons. That is the area that we're hoping to treat with this effort, and dispersed across that east side of Savory Creek. So important to note, it's located within crucial winter year-long range for mule deer, and it's also within the South Rawlins Sagegrass Core area. We're going to work with Carbon County Weed and Pest. Last year, Phase 1, they treated 8,000 acres. We jumped in this year with 3,000 acres slated for 2022. Really excited to see this one come to fruition. You can see we've got a whole bunch of partners who are really excited to also see this one come together. Total project cost of $2.25 million. The MDI request to the commission today is $500,000. $50,000. Sorry, I'm not sure what I said, but whatever it was wrong. 50,000 is right. Thank you. Next.
Yeah. These guys have many talents.
Next up, Enos Creek Riparian Restoration. This is within the Owl Creek Matitsi herd unit, 15 miles south of Matitsi. The goal here is to provide habitat for mule deer by enhancing riparian areas. We're talking about a mile of creek here on Enos Creek itself. This is an example of what these look like, these beaver dam analogs. These are intended to slow the water, spread it out. And you can see on the left where we're hoping to do this across a couple different land ownerships, BLM and private. The black dots indicate the areas that we're hoping to put these beaver dam analogs in. So we're hoping to do 50 of these. This is an interesting project because it's followed up. Not only are we going to install the beaver dam analogs, but we're going to follow that up with some beaver translocations. The goal again is to raise the water table, reconnect the stream with the floodplain, which in the end produces food and fawning cover for mule deer. Hoping to do that this summer and move some beavers maybe as early as this fall. Got some good funding partners in on this one as well. Total project cost $55,000 and the MDI request is $15,000. Next up, we've got Bags Mule Deer Migration Corridor Fence Modification. This is 20 miles north of Bags along Highway 789. Goal is to increase permeability for mule deer. And we're talking about a little more than 12 and a half miles of fence. You can see on the map here on the left, the red indicates the areas that we're hoping to modify these fences. It's also worth noting that you can see there the pink shading, that's part of the corridor. And then the blue shading, which is a little hard to see in this light, is crucial winter range. And so really important area for deer and a place where increased permeability is a good thing. I'd like to call to your attention kind of a unique design element of this one. If you look on the top picture, you can see that H brace there that's got a couple of sucker rods that are pulled out currently in that picture. And that's a unique feature that allows some permeability for mule deer and antelope at certain times of the year when we still have livestock in those pastures. And so they're getting creative over there and doing some pretty good things. Even when we have to keep the gates closed, they've got a way for those deer to move through a little easier than they had before. So wanted to point that out. This is a place where we've had mule deer and other critters become entangled in the fence or get caught between the right-of-way fences, and want to do something positive about that. You certainly have a good list of funding partners on this project, and total project cost $230,000. The request to the commission today is $41,000. Next up, Crazy Woman Cheatgrass 2. This is a project you've seen before. We brought before you Crazy Woman Cheatgrass 1, 17 miles south of Buffalo within the Upper Powder River mule deer herd. We're talking about 3,200 acres this year. I think this map is pretty darn cool. So if you look at the map on the right, all of those dots are dots of mule deer use within this area. This is a winter use typically, and so we've got a bunch of deer that use this country. And if you look really closely, the area outlined in green is where we did work in 2020, and the area in purple, kind of that north piece, is the area where we're hoping to do some work this year. And you can see we've got really good mule deer use across this area, and the results from last year, or from 2020, I should say, are really positive. We've got a big increase in perennial grasses and a reduction in cheatgrass, which was the goal. Obviously, we did 4,100 acres before. We're hoping to do an additional 3,200 acres in this area. Good partners again. Total project cost $268,000. The mule deer MDI request today is $75,000. Moving up to Owl Creek Meeteetse. This project's 25 miles southwest of Meeteetse. This is the Grass Creek Noon Point Aspen Enhancement. Goal again is to enhance summer and transitional range for mule deer by working within these aspen stands. We're talking about 250 acres. A couple of maps here to just display to you generally where these are. You can see these projects are across several different land ownerships and are intended to benefit mule deer. Yeah, we'll have chainsaw crews come in. The results from previous efforts along these lines have indicated increase in forbs, grasses, shrubs, really important habitats for mule deer, and certainly hoping to regenerate aspen as well. Projects include WWNRT, BLM, Governor's Big Game License, and Army F. Total project cost $140,000. Request to the commission today, $40,000. Moving up to the sublet mule deer herd, Luke Lynch, WHMA wildlife friendly fence. So this is 2.5 miles north of Pinedale, adjacent to Fremont Lake. The goal here is to install some fencing to protect the WHMA. We're talking about less than a mile of fencing. You can see on the map here, we've got the blue on the map is Luke Lynch WHMA itself. And then you can see that red line on the north side. That is a potential location for this fence. These guys up here have been working really hard recently with partners to identify the best location for that fence. It will go somewhere. We think it may end up going here. Nonetheless, there's another location that might be a little further up the lake that might even be better. And so they're working on the ground to figure that out right now. But we need a fence up there, and they're working on the best place for it. 0.8 miles of fence. We've had some livestock trespass issues along that area, and so this is going to mitigate that. Definitely incorporate lots of wildlife friendly elements into that fence, including stock gates that can be opened during migration periods. They want to get started on this right away, maybe as early as this summer. So we've got the Popo office and lots of game and fish in kind. If this does end up being on our boundary, it'll be like a lot of the other fences in that country, constructed of pole top metal pipe. And so it'll be a stout fence that'll last a very long time. Excited to talk to you today about CWD and declining mule deer in the Southwest Bighorn Basin. This is 2 herd units, Paint Rock and Southwest Bighorns, North Central Wyoming Bighorn Basin area. The goal of this project is to collect baseline movement survival data within these 2 herd units. We're talking about a big area, 3 million acres. And you can see on the map, all the way from Boyson Reservoir, quite a bit north of all the way up into the north end of the Bighorns. Kind of hard for me to see on the map, but certainly everything to the east of Worland. So what are we doing? We're going to attempt to collar 100 doe mule deer throughout both of those herd units. We've never been able to do anything there before. It's going to help us better understand survival rates, seasonal range use, better define our herd unit boundaries. And one of the important elements of this project in light of CWD is better understanding the level of interchange between these herd units. What's going on with deer? How are they moving across that landscape? This data is going to help inform habitat use, potentially future habitat projects, survival, identify CWD hotspots, migration, and interchange. We've partnered with both BLM and the Migration Initiative thus far, and are requesting $75,000 today to initiate this project. Moving right along, Hess Ranch Beaver Dam analogs. So this is, again, Upper Powder River, 24 miles northwest of KC. The goal here is similar to the other Beaver Dam analog projects, improve riparian conditions along 1.5 miles of stream. You can see possibly on this map where those Beaver Dam analogs will likely be placed by the blue dots. So there's a really headwater area important for those mule deer. The goal is to install 30 BDAs along 1.5 miles of the Red Fork of the Powder River on the Hess Ranch. We're hoping to increase forage and fawning cover for mule deer, and they're hoping to get started as early as this August. Got the National Wild Turkey Federation as a potential partner on this one. These Beaver Dam analog projects often don't come at a high cost, which is really nice. And so this one's a $6,400 request to the commission. Okay, sublet mule deer herd. This is along Highway 191, about 3 miles west of Pinedale. The goal is to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions and improve public safety along about 1.37 miles of the highway. So might be a little hard to see this, but I'm going to try. So you can see this is a state land parcel here. This is the existing fencing associated with this overpass here. This is the road to Cora. This is what we're hoping to extend. So this fence right here, we're hoping to extend to reduce collisions from deer that are working their way around the end of that fence. So Trapper's Point was installed in 2012. It's got great 8-foot tall fences on both sides. Right now, critters are going around them. We're hoping that this will help mitigate that. This is an issue that's been identified locally and regionally. 7,200 feet of fencing is what's slated with all the associated deer ramps and gates, et cetera, to make this thing whole. And that's going to follow YDOT specs, be maintained by YDOT. got, again, pretty good project partners on this one. Total project cost, $146,000. The request from MDI is $34,000. All right, bear with me. We're almost there. Green Mountain Aspen Riparian Enhancement. This is the Sweetwater herd units, 15 miles southeast of Jeffrey City. We're hoping to improve habitat for mule deer on about 800 acres. If you look here, this is a Willow Creek watershed. It's mixed land ownership, BLM, private, a little bit of state in there. And Amy Anderson, our biologist there, has been working within this geography very successfully. And we're hoping to expand upon previous efforts. So the goal is to improve aspen and riparian habitats on Green Mountain, which provide the highest quality areas for mule deer to have their fawns and gather the necessary resources to get them through winter. Contractors are going to cut conifers out of aspen. BLM is potentially planning to conduct future prescribed burns, and we're going to phase this out over about a 3-year period. Lots of project partners on this one. Great match. $100,000 request to MDI on a $400,000 project. So what does all that mean? 10 projects. We're talking about 7 herd units representing 25% of the statewide mule deer herd population. Over 3 million acres, $1.8 million worth of work. We're requesting $452,000 of commission funds this round. For a total leverage of 3 to 1. So that means for every commission dollar, there's at least 3 outside dollars that are being brought to the table. If you wanted to look that at a cost per acre basis, that'd be $1.67 an acre. I told you at the front end, we'd circle back and talk a little bit about what the commission has been able to do thus far. And wow, what an impressive list of work. 59 projects approved. $25 million allocated for mule deer within the state. We've been able to convert over 100 miles of fencing so far to wildlife friendly specifications. We've treated over 45,000 acres of mule deer habitat. As you well know, we've got a big emphasis on invasive annual grasses. 114,000 acres of invasive annual grasses we've been able to treat, and nearly 6 million acres of research. Total acres impacted 6.3 million. And I just want to reiterate, we really appreciate the support of the commission, the long-term support of the Mule Deer Initiative. This is a list of projects that we're really proud of and happy to be able to put on the ground for mule deer in Wyoming. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Ian. Excellent. Any comments? Questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to, does this money all go at once or does it just go out as needed?
Ask him.
How does that work?
Jolovich.
Mr. President, Commissioner Jolovich. So this money would be available nearly immediately. It's this current fiscal year funding. And so on some of these projects, we'll be able to start buying supplies and getting the things necessary to put it on the ground quickly.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make a motion to give the Mule Deer Initiative what they need, what was projected on there for this year from the commission.
Second?
Second.
Move beyond rabbit seasons.
Moved by Commissioner Jolovich, second by Commissioner Lundvall to accept the department's recommendation for the statewide mule deer initiative. Any comments on the record? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thanks for what you do. Next up is Mr. Choma, and I believe he's going to do it online. Is that correct?
Yeah, President Doobie, Director Nesbitt, members of the commission. Mike Choma, our law enforcement supervisor out of Casper, will be joining us now, and it looks like he's ready to go. So
click the light.
I'll turn the lights on.
Let me just get my
Go ahead, Mike.
Good morning. I apologize, I can't be there in person. I'm just a little bit under the weather right now, but I can still click the buttons and run through this program. You'll have to tell me, are you seeing the presentation pop up?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Well, good morning, President Doobie, Commissioners, Director Nesvik. My name is Mike Choma. I'm the law enforcement supervisor for the Game and Fish Department. Been here for just at 31 years and going strong. Today, I'm just going to give a brief informational presentation of the department's law enforcement program. You see from this slide, just gives you a bird's eye view of how many law enforcement positions we have within the department. These are all of our sworn officers from top to bottom. We've got the director, we've got chief game warden, deputy chief game warden, 8 regional supervisors, myself as the law enforcement program supervisor, our law enforcement coordinator position, a game warden coordinator. We've got 2 in the state. We've got an investigative unit supervisor, a large carnivore conflict coordinator, 51 district game wardens, 6 wildlife investigators, and 5 access coordinators. And you'll see at the bottom, we have an additional category of game wardens. We've got 12 of those positions and only currently 3 of those are filled. So this slide just gives some location and distribution of our law enforcement personnel across the state. You can see the individual region offices in highlight and how our personnel and their warden districts all come together to cover the entire state. This slide gives a brief understanding of our Title VI peace officer status. Title VI is in the criminal statutes for Wyoming, and it defines peace officer, as you can see there on the slide. But the parts that I want to bring your attention to are in highlight, where it talks about during the performance of their official duties. That was an addition to the existing statute back in 2020 that helped to solidify the professional peace officer status of all of our law enforcement personnel when they're doing any of the official duties that are assigned to them. And similarly, in Title VII, which is the criminal procedure statutes, there's also a definition of peace officer that we had modified to match in Title VI at the same time back in 2020. And since we are certified peace officers, we often coordinate with various other law enforcement agencies in our duties and to assist in their official duties. Some of the things that our law enforcement personnel are involved in on a regular basis are field patrols. There's different aspects of field patrol duties. Our personnel will patrol by boat on rivers and lakes. They'll patrol on foot in the mountains and throughout their entire district. And we've even got employees that have come to us from California, as you can see on the left. Some more field patrol with horseback patrol, checking compliance of fishermen on the ice, and contacting hunters for compliance and to collect harvest data at check stations. It took me a while, but I finally found this rare picture of Deputy Chief Edberg when he got out of the office. Not sure which year this was, but we at least got one picture. Our law enforcement personnel also conduct task forces. They'll deal in specialized efforts to ensure compliance with boating and fishing and hunting laws and regulations. From this slide, you can just see an example of watercraft safety and BUI compliance. That's boating under the influence during a 4th of July holiday celebration on one of the reservoirs, and also some specialized night patrol and equipment. Some additional task forces that our personnel participate in are winter range patrol, monitoring native winter ranges when wildlife may be the most vulnerable to poaching. Watercraft patrol for compliance of boating safety regulations. And you just never know what you're going to see out there on a standard day of watercraft safety patrol. By commission policy, our law enforcement personnel need to qualify with all 3 of their department issued firearms twice a year. So that's with a handgun, shotgun, and a rifle. We also qualify in required custody control tactics, such as handcuffing techniques, use of OC spray, and expandable batons. We often refer to this as twist and shout sessions. Law enforcement personnel also receive specialized training, topics such as snowmobile skills and winter survival. And some additional specialized training in horse use and care and patrol techniques, which over time has morphed into a really successful mentoring training program with our more experienced officers passing on their horsemanship skills to others. Game wardens conduct field investigations of wildlife violations within their area jurisdiction. Here you can just see some taking measurements of evidence that's found in the field, tracking blood trails, retrieving bullets from carcasses, all in a day's work. And the extremes to which our people will go to unearth some poaching case evidence. Also, the photo on the left shows an online or a social media photo that was able to be matched up exactly with time and persistence on the ground to be able to find a specific and precise kill site on this animal. You can see the red arrows in that photograph on the left correspond to similar red arrows on the right. Game wardens conduct field necropsies to collect evidence in the field and also to determine cause of death when they're called to these different scenes. Our law enforcement personnel execute search warrants for case investigations, which may turn into larger, more complicated cases down the road. And when that does happen, they often get turned over or will be worked cooperatively with specialized assistance from our Wildlife Investigations Unit. The example that I have shown here today is Operation Tent Sleep, which took about 2.5 years of investigation and about 60 law enforcement officers all told from different states and jurisdictions, roughly 3,500 man hours of investigation time, and consisted of both federal and state wildlife violations of laws. In that one case, there were at least 17 illegally killed big game animals. Over $300,000 in fines and restitution were handed out, and roughly 36 years of suspended hunting privileges by the end of that case. Another example is the rusty crayfish case that you may also be aware of. Both of these examples were provided as updates to the commission in the past. Rusty crayfish case dealt with an illegal importation of rusty crayfish to private ponds south of Douglas back in 2009. There was a felony Lacey Act violation that was able to be taken to court. There were $100,000 in fines and restitution came as a result of that. And also the Game and Fish Department has spent over $34,000 to help remove the rusty crayfish from those locations. And just you can see that the last note that back in 2020, rusty crayfish was found in the Laramie River drainage. Along with our investigative unit, another integral part of solving wildlife crimes is our forensics lab. It is absolutely state of the art with the personnel that we have in that facility, as well as the equipment and the expertise that they have. They assist our officers with identifying lots of different things, such as species from blood samples, and even they're able to identify often the sex of animal from blood samples. They have lots of capabilities, such as identifying individual hair samples that are collected as evidence. They're able to match tool marks and cut marks on bones and carcasses that are found in the field and seized as evidence. And really the amount of skill and ability that comes from our forensics lab is absolutely amazing. Even the DNA sequencing, get ahead of myself, fly back in here. Our lab even handles DNA sequencing. And in this slide, you can see examples of meat that were seized in one case. And just a quick example of how detailed the DNA sequencing process is, and in order to make connections in these cases between possibly a headless carcass that's found in the field and evidence that's retrieved at a suspect's house and so forth. Now we can fly. So our law enforcement personnel, the agency has an MOU agreement with the Office of State Lands and Investment for enforcement of off-road travel, camping violations, open fires, and antler collection. This slide just shows a comparison between 2016 and 2020 of camping and off-road travel violations, open fires, and even littering. And you could see from this graphic that camping and off-road violations are the most prevalent violations that our personnel will document. The department also manages a robust stop poaching program. And we provide several ways for the public to report suspected wildlife violations. The first on the far left is a text to tip opportunity where people can text some kind of tip information to the department. In the center, you see an example of our online reporting page on our website. And the third option is the hotline report, where people can call that 877 number and report information direct to our dispatch center. All of the reports that we receive are followed up on. Many turn out to be unfounded, while some actually turn into poaching investigations where the violation otherwise would have gone undetected if not for the public's involvement. I can't stress enough how important it is that we receive information, even if there's a suspected violation, the opportunity for our law enforcement personnel to dig into those and find out one way or the other if there is a violation or not is just it's paramount to our whole program in protecting the wildlife resource. You can see the number of tips received chart on the left, and also the number of citations and warnings that come from individual cases on those corresponding years. This is a 5-year comparison of restitution that was awarded to the state from the defendants, court-ordered restitution as a result of stop poaching tips from the public. And of note here is the Game and Fish Department does not receive any of this restitution. This money goes to the school district in the county where the violation took place. So sometimes members of the public think that we're receiving, or the department is receiving all the restitution money that's awarded, and that's not the case. It goes to the school district in the county. The department also participates in the Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact and has been since statutes were enacted back in 1996. As you can see from this map, the only 2 states that are currently not members but are in the process of becoming members are Massachusetts and Hawaii. What this Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact does is it says a wildlife suspension from one member state may be honored in each participating state. So for example, if someone gets suspended for their hunting and fishing privileges in Wyoming, all of those other 48 compact member states may also suspend that person's privilege for the same duration. It's been a huge deterrent ever since the late 90s when it started, and as more states become members. This chart shows a 5-year comparison of Wyoming court suspensions that we've entered into the Wyoming Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact. Some years more than others, but in essence, each one of these suspensions is more than likely going to be honored in all the other compact member states. This slide shows a compilation of the national entries for wildlife suspensions throughout the entire compact organization. And you can see that it remains fairly consistent throughout the years, but it is one heck of a deterrent when people realize that they're not just being suspended in one state, but they very well may be in all the other 48 compact member states. The department also participates with the Wyoming Wildlife Protectors Association. This started back in 1983 as a way to be able to award cash or checks for the public that provide us tips on poaching cases. It's a nonprofit organization, and it's currently funded by restitution payments that are ordered by the courts. So when I mentioned earlier that restitution payments go to the school district, there are some courts across the state that are dedicating these restitution payments go to the Wyoming Wildlife Protectors Association for this reward program. But again, it's outside of the department. And you can see the current board members that we've got listed there. I currently serve as the board secretary. Also through the Wyoming Wildlife Protectors Association, many people are not interested in receiving rewards and cash for their tips and their information. They tell us it's just their part of trying to do what's right and help to manage their wildlife resource. But this shows just the number of rewards that have been processed over the last 5 years. And here we could see the actual dollar amount that's been donated to those individual people. You can see some years it's $15,000, $16,000 on down to just a couple $1,000. The Protectors Association has a pay schedule for different types of violations where they can award up to $5,000 for the most serious crimes. And in those years, 2016 and 2018, there were a couple of those cases where we received substantial tips on major cases. And so the Protectors Association did award $5,000 checks. Just getting into the numbers game for those that are interested in statistics. Here's a 5-year comparison of all our department law enforcement personnel, written warnings, the citations that are issued, and documented violations with no known suspect. And you can see that they've maintained a relative consistency over the years. Some of the variation very well could be attributed to differences in the number of those entry-level game warden positions that we have. Some years we have more than others. And here we have a 5-year comparison of cases that are categorized under terrestrial wildlife, big game, small game type cases, sport fisheries violations, non-wildlife violations, which would also include all the watercraft violations, and AIS, aquatic invasive species violations. And I would sure stand for any questions.
Sounded like your own applause.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was very impressive. Any questions from the commission or comments? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Get better.
I'm working on it.
Campbell.
Well, good afternoon. I think we just passed the noon hour and we'll wait for the presentation to get up. But first of all, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity today to speak in front of the commission and the director and other members of the agency about the fish culture section here with the Game and Fish Department. Okay. Let's see, make sure I got this working okay. All right, I think I got it. So if you're ready, I think I'll go ahead and start. So first of all, we in the state here, we have our fish hatchery system is managed for 2 reasons, really. It's sport fishery and then also the conservation for native fish. So total, we have 10 fish hatcheries in the state or rearing stations. The difference there is a rearing station won't have an egg incubation part of the system, but will also rear fish. So one thing unique about our statewide hatchery system here in Wyoming is we manage the system as one statewide system together. In many other states, individual hatcheries are managed regionally and fish are allocated that way. We don't do that because of our size of our state. And then we have just 10 facilities to make things happen. So within the hatcheries, we work hard with fish management to achieve the right species to stock, the number, the size, and then the timing that when we feel that those fish are going to make the biggest impact in the waters. So within the section, we have a few goals. One is to maintain fish health. We work with our fish health lab and services to ensure that happens. We also maintain our genetic integrity of our brood stocks, which is extremely critical. We also, our brood stocks are sought after nationally for some eggs, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. And then also, I think we do a good job providing a diverse sport fishery across the state. And we go to the sportsmen and find out their needs, and we try to make that happen. So what and who make up the section? First of all, the 10 fish hatcheries and rearing stations. Part of our section also is we have a statewide spawning crew and a fish distribution crew that specialize. The statewide spawning crews specialize in the trapping of the wild fish and then also the spawning of those and then send them to our facilities. And then our distribution crew does a lot more of the fish hauling with our big tanks, our big tandem trucks you may see on the road from time to time. Our section is made up of 39 full-time employees. Temporary employees can vary year to year, but typically around a dozen. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about the production for the state. So this varies year to year, but in 2021, we stocked 6.6 million fish, and that equated to about a little over 500,000 pounds of fish were stocked. And then of that, 5.1 million were the cold water fish species we rear, which is 14, and then 1.5 million of the cool and warm water species. Now, with the cool and warm water species, we don't rear those on a large scale in the state right now. We rely on outside trades. So in like 2 weeks from now, I'll be attending a meeting, and it'll be in Nebraska, and where we get together and we may trade some of our eggs or even some of our fish within our state that are sought after for some of our cool and warm water species. So that way we satisfy that need. In regards to our egg production, we have, first of all, 11 captive brood stocks that are at our 10 facilities. And then we also manage currently 8 wild brood stocks that are across the state. And from that, we produce about 14 million eggs annually. And this is primarily used for our in-state needs. But then also, when I talk about them cool and warm water trades, some of these eggs are sent to other states as well as part of the trade. So in total, we trade with about a dozen states outside Wyoming, but also some of our federal hatcheries as well take some of our eggs. In regards to our hatchery locations, you can see these are our 10 facilities shown on the map here. Again, these facilities are just basically in locations where we have water. The important thing here is that we have a good water source that produces pathogen-free water source that's good for the fish. So you can see when we look at distributing that, you know, it's where the water is available. So that's where those locations are. So first of all is our Auburn Fish Hatchery over there located in the Star Valley, just west of Afton. So this facility was built in 1941 and was most recently renovated in 2015. Now this facility produces about 3/4 million fish a year, 16,000 pounds. But what this facility is really known for is its Snake River cutthroat broodstock. So our state manages 4 cutthroat broodstocks: the Snake River cutthroat, Yellowstone, Colorado River, and then the Bear River. So this is where we house this Auburn Fish Hatchery, and the conditions for this environment here has the right water temperature and in the right geographic location for this. So it was a perfect fit. Another important thing with the Auburn Fish Hatchery is it's a very important producer of our kokanee statewide, and then also for incubation and production. And most recently, there was a grad study done on the Flaming Gorge where it showed that the kokanee that impacted the gorge that were stocked from the state of Utah and from Wyoming from our various hatcheries, that Auburn hatchery had a huge influence on this. So really important. Also, this facility has an isolation. And we have 5 of those across the state. And those are really important when we bring in eggs that may have not had the full gauntlet of disease certification, or we're concerned about some other concern with those eggs before we bring them in, or fish across the state. So here's a picture here just showing some of our Snake River cutthroat broodstock. We typically spawn these as 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. And you can see this facility is nice and covered. This slide here shows our incubation room where we produce all our Snake River cutthroat eggs. Also the kokanee eggs across the state, a lot of them get brought here. And then the photo on the right side shows a little snapshot of that isolation room where you can see we have ability to rear eggs or incubate eggs and rear small fish. Our next facility is our Boulder rearing station. So this is located just east of Pinedale there, just outside of Boulder. And then this facility was built in 1952. We produce more pounds out of this facility. You can see 33,000, so almost double from Auburn. But this facility is really important for the fall rainbow brood. So we have 2 rainbow trout broods in our state. And this is our true, as the name says, fall spawning rainbow. And this facility has an isolation facility as well. So that's really important. And then also, this facility has our 3 species facility, where we've done some of our work with our suckers and our chubs. Photo here just showing that rainbow trout brood stock. We send a lot of eggs out of Boulder across the country from this brood stock. And then here's a picture here of our 3 species facility here. Again, this is a little bit more put together with tanks, and cost is definitely in mind here. But we're using this more for holding fish where there might have been a treatment, and then getting those fish and then being able to move them at a later date. Also, hats off to the crew here. They've done a lot of experimentation with trying to spawn these fish, and we continue to learn more and more about that. Moving on is the Clark's Fork Hatchery. So this is just north of Cody, about a half hour north of Cody, close to the Montana border. And this facility is built in 1970, and believe it or not, one of our newer facilities. So it's 50 years old, but it's still one of our newer facilities. This facility produces a lot more pounds. It says 70,000 pounds here, but we can produce up to probably 80 to 85,000 pounds max, depending on the requests in a given year. And this is our 2nd leading producer of fish across the state. A lot of early rearing of fish and a lot of different species here. We do a lot of rainbow trout. We do kokanee. We do some of our cutthroat, some brook trout. So it's quite a diversity we do up here at this facility. One real nice thing about this facility too is we have a constant 51 to 52 degree water temperature, which is really conducive to cold water trout rearing. Moving on is our Daniel Hatchery. So this is just west of Pinedale, just outside of the town of Daniel. And this is one of our older facilities. So this one here you could see is just over 100 years old. But we most recently did a small renovation in 2018. And now this facility, we don't produce the numbers of fish we produce at our other facilities. But what's really extremely important here is we have our Colorado cutthroat brood is here stationed at this facility. And then also, this is extremely important for a high alpine lake stocking across the state. So sometimes some of the fish that come on this site, we may hold for a year, year and a half. And then the brood stock actually gets hold for even longer, 4 to 5 years. And that's because of the water temperature is much colder in this facility, being about mid 40s. Now, that's a challenge for us to keep on the growth of fish if we want to speed fish up. This is not the facility, but we have such a need as well, where there's a time where we need fish to not grow as fast. And then also when it comes to helicopter stocking, it comes down to the small fish. We can stock more of those in some of the waters. And we are very, when those fish get stocked in there, they survive real well, even though they're being small, since they don't really have the predation. So anyway, that's an important part of the Daniel Hatchery. Here's just a few pictures here. Kind of a neat picture up in the upper right column of the Colorado cutthroat trout brood from up above. Moving on, just outside of DuBois is our DuBois Hatchery, and this was built in 1940. And then most recently renovated, the last renovation in 2012. And this facility produces about 25,000 pounds. Before the renovation, this actually produced about 15,000 pounds of fish. After the renovation, we've been able to produce about 25,000. This facility, one really interesting thing is on about 500 gallons a minute, we produce about 25,000 pounds of fish annually. So the system's set up where we recirculate the water, we recondition the water in between uses for the fish, and then that's how we're able to do what we do at this facility. Another interesting thing is, just besides our rearing units and tanks outside on the fish, is we actually recirculate the incubation water that's used on our eggs as well. So to conserve water, we're looking at maybe a 1/4 of a gallon to a 1/2 a gallon a minute of water per stack that may be incubating 500,000 eggs. Here's just a picture of what I'm talking about. On the left, there's some drip incubator stacks where we do some of our recirculation. And you can see and we did this ourselves. We built these little catch basins on the bottom and then repumped it towards the top. Another thing too, on the picture on the right is with these new systems on these renovations on using water multiple times, we've gone away from a traditional hatchery approach where the water goes through the facility, goes through rearing units, and then the water gets discharged where we're doing it multiple times, where the monitoring becomes more important. So we found that our employees spend much more time on this aspect of their job than we did 10 years ago. Moving on, just out of Casper, just west of Casper is Spees Hatchery, which is our largest fish hatchery we have in our state. We had a significant renovation that was completed in 2012. And this really is our mothership of all of our facilities in our state. This produces 1.9 million fish, and about half of our state's production comes from this facility. So this facility is extremely important in that. Also, about 2 years ago, we had one isolation facility here, and we converted it over to 2 isolation facilities to give us a little more flexibility, especially with some of our cool and warm water species work. We've kind of started to kind of dabble our toes into a little bit. So here's a couple pictures if you haven't visited this facility yet, and you can see in this building on the left, we got 12 footers, 16 footers, and 20-foot circular tanks. And then on the right, these big, really large tanks that are 36 foot in diameter and then about 8 feet deep. So lots of production comes here from this facility. Another important part of this facility too, being close to Casper, is the education portion, where we can get the community involved in what this facility does and what fish hatcheries in general contribute across the state. One really cool thing I want to talk about briefly this morning is about 2 years ago, we initiated some walleye trials at our Spees hatchery. And like I said, we've been dependent on these cool and warm water trades from outside of our state for that production. The problem is AIS has crept closer to our state and become more concerns. Well, then also many of our trade partners are dealing with the same problems and concerns with AIS. So what we did here is we said, we knew there was some walleye rearing going on in the lab, in some circular tanks, but most of that rearing was done outside, and we're concerned about that AIS and what that could mean to us in the future. So we went ahead and initiated some walleye trials, and we visited with some folks from Iowa DNR, Wisconsin Stevens Point, and they did some research and were successful in the lab setting with walleye, rearing them from egg up to size of release. And we tried the same thing. And hats off to our folks there at the Spees hatchery and some other folks in our section that looked into the work. So we made setups similar to what they did. You could see one of the tanks there on the left has kind of clay, the turbidity. We use some splashing on top. And what that does is for our walleye is that way the walleye don't get into that stage where they start to eat each other and give them a constant feed throughout. So we adopted a lot of their protocols, and then we tried it. So what did we see? So in 2020, we took about a little over 500,000 eggs. We had about an 80% eye up in our incubators. And then from incubator all the way up to when we released these fish, we had close to 75% survival, which was exactly what they seen in the lab setting, which was really successful. And we were really, really thrilled to see that, especially doing it on a little bit larger scale. And in 2020, we stocked 54,000 fish. So we said, hey, this is great. Let's try it again. In 2021, we took a few more eggs. We treated some eggs with some iodine to kind of see how they took that for disease purposes down the road. And then we had 80% eye up again, which was similar. Now our survival in 2021 was a little bit less, but what we did is we had a mechanical failure overnight with one of our machines that was feeding the clay. And because it was kind of more of experimental, we didn't have that alarmed at the time. Otherwise, we were actually on track to be stocking about 80%. So some pretty cool success. And then there's a couple pictures down there in the bottom where we also have now worked on with some bluegill and green sunfish hybrids, seeing how they take being reared in circular tanks. Now going on to our story hatchery, which well over 100 years old. This facility is so important because of its 5 captive brood stocks, the brooks, the browns, the lake trout, the Eagle Lake rainbow, and the golden trout. And this facility, as mentioned here on the slide, over 20,000 visitors a year. So this is our most visited facility we have. Visitors, especially when we get into about May through September, it's nonstop. Our 5 captive brood stocks that are there, the golden trout, the only golden trout brood stock across the nation. So we're proud to say we house that here in the state of Wyoming. And again, here's just a couple pictures of those visitors. Our folks spent a lot of time with tours and educating the public, and are real active in the surrounding communities. 10 Sleep Hatchery, just over on the other side of the Bighorns, just outside of the town of 10 Sleep. And then this facility was built in 1939 and renovated in 2011. And this facility produces 25,000 pounds. But one thing about this facility is if you are going to build a facility the right way from the top to the bottom and not cut any corners, this is the facility for sure. Every time the fish, the fish get the water's gone over one group of fish, it's retreated before the next group, and so on all the way through. And the folks, and you can see with the pictures, it's set up real nice. And it's really important because we have our Yellowstone cutthroat trout brood stock, and they require some of this really excellent water quality at this facility. Here's some pictures here. Our brood facility over there on the left. We also hold some of our 2-year-olds in that dome-shaped structure, and then they get in the covered structure just past that. Next is the Tillet Rearing Station. So this is built in 1958, and this facility produces 36,000 pounds. It has an isolation facility. One really important thing, we now have our kokanee captive brood stock here. So this is the only captive brood stock of kokanee in the nation. Recently, we've shared some of our protocols with the state of Colorado, and they're working on a kokanee captive brood stock as well. Especially since in recent years with the drought and reservoirs dropping, they've had a struggle to get their kokanee numbers. So this will really help them moving forward. Here's a picture here of our isolation facility. Again, really important to have this in this part of the state. And then here's some pictures of our kokanee captive brood stock. And this brood stock, they all spawn as 3-year-olds. Is what we do. And it's really interesting. We actually spawn these fish, take the eggs, and we start their first 1.5 years of growth at the Daniel Fish Hatchery and utilize their cold water temperature. And it holds back this brood stock so they don't develop too fast. Otherwise, if they mature too fast, it's hard to get a feel on when they're going to spawn, and you won't be successful. So we've utilized our Daniel to get them the first half, and then our Tillet Rearing Station finishes them off the last 1.5 years, and it's worked a lot better than expected. And we knew we were going to have some work going in on this kokanee captive brood stock, but we're really pleased. And the one thing that's really important here is we only have limited wild kokanee populations across the state, and their populations have been going down and down with our egg availability. So, and our popularity of the kokanee fishery has been extremely high. So here are some of our brood results in 2019. We produced just over 2.5 million eggs, 92% I. Now in 2020, now doing a brood stock, sometimes you learn a little bit. And we kind of missed the target size as these fish as 2-year-olds. And so we only produced less than a million eggs, but we had a lot fewer adults too we were working with. But back in 2021, this year, this last spawning season, we've ramped up the production again. And again, we hit a target size on eggs, another about 92% I up. And then also we shipped eggs down to Colorado. Also, we sent eggs to the state of South Dakota, which we haven't done for quite a number of years, for them to start up their kokanee program as well. And then finally, our last facility is our Wigwam Rearing Station. So just down the road from 10 Sleep. And this produces about 45,000 pounds of fish. the Bear River cutthroat broodstock is extremely important at this facility. And this is our third largest statewide production facility. And the water quality from this facility is something to mention, because a lot of the fish that we produce from this facility have some of the best looking fins of any of our facilities across the state. Here's a couple pictures here of our Bear River cutthroat brood. Now, this brood originally was at our Daniel Fish Hatchery, and we did have success there, but we had two cutthroat broodstocks at the same station, which isn't really the best planning on how to manage these broodstocks. So when we moved this over to Wigwam, actually this Bear River cutthroat brood has actually flourished there, even better than they were doing there at Daniel. Let's see. Oh, I think I hit the wrong button. Okay, and then moving on is our spawning crew. So they're stationed out of Pinedale, and they're primarily responsibility for wild fish investigation work, trapping, and then the spawning of those fish. And so they work with our statewide hatcheries, and then also some of our outside trade partners as well on sending some eggs. Another part of their job is they assist with the high alpine lake stocking across the state. And then they also do some stocking when needed at some of our other hatchery facilities. Some of their operations that they have across the state are kind of highlighted. You can see up there in Yellowstone with some Yellowstone cutthroat. And then a lot of our west side of the state's a lot of the work that they do, but you can see it's all over, and a lot of kokanee work down on the Utah towards Colorado border. And one thing that I have to give them a little bit of a hard time about is they get some of the coolest places to go do some of their work. You can see some work up there. That's up in the Yellowstone, doing some collection of Yellowstone adults, and they took some milk actually from the males, and then we combined them with some females on the picture to the right, and infused some new genetics into our Yellowstone cutthroat brood. And we actually did that right there at the Cody High School, so the students could watch this happen. And then the picture down the lower left was at Jenny Lake, where there was a bunch of we were doing lake trout, and there were a lot of tourists that were visiting the park got to see us do some infusion there that we used to improve the genetics there at our Story hatchery. The high alpine lake stocking there, there's some pictures there from the helicopters. And we do this usually the last week of July or first week of August each year. And then in regards to our statewide response, we have two individuals that are responsible for this part of our section, and they drive all over. And you can see sometimes it could be 130,000 miles a year that get logged. There are a fleet of vehicles that we assist, our whole section assists with, a different size vehicles. So we have different size to do whatever application, because of course we can't take these big, large tandem trucks into, some of the remote areas in the wilderness and stuff, and some of the forested areas. So also these guys really help with some of our public outreach activities. So they're all over the state, and they look for opportunities where they can kind of tell the story of what we do and what they do to other folks. Moving on to some challenges we have in our facility. The first thing, and I mentioned before, is our hatcheries are older. A lot of them have been renovated, but some haven't. But we do have the largest inventory of buildings in our whole department. So we have 68 buildings and then 41 residences that we maintain. With our new renovations, we have some new technologies, and that does require some of that maintenance as well. Other challenges we see are fish health challenges. We're fortunate we're a headwater state, so our neighboring states have to deal with these fish health challenges a lot more than we have to, but we're not immune to that, and we're starting to see that creep on us a little bit more. Our current concerns, whirling disease, has been there for a number of years, and then bacterial cold water disease we see in our hatcheries. And we are working forward on, we see that in one of our hatcheries, and we are going to be working with a new strain of rainbow trout that's bacterial cold water resistant here in the next few months to see how they may do it in one of our facilities. Future concerns we have with disease, bacterial kidney disease, enteric red mouth gill lice. IHNV and other viruses. And you can see that picture down below. That wasn't fortunately taken here in the state of Wyoming, but with viruses that get brought in, that's what could be the result. One thing we've been working on here the last 2 years quite a bit is biosecurity challenges, especially with AIS concerns. We have some AIS concerns that we had show up on the North Platte River just below Jessica's Pond. So we had to do some work recently at Spees. We're also seeing that by our Clark Fork. But what we've done is we've tried to shore up these issues at our facilities. And part of doing this is, making sure we have disease-free water for sure, but we need to protect our effluent. So that water that leaves our facility, we need to make sure that it's not water-to-water contact with water that wherever it's being discharged is. So that way we could be potentially bringing a bug into our facility the reverse direction. Also, we're looking at trying to cover some of our rearing units. Facility access. So what I mean by control is to be smart, set up foot baths, disinfections, and stuff like that. But there might be parts of the facility that are real critical where we have to limit some public access in there. But then we got to look for other opportunities to create as well. So, and part of this is just the education. And that education starts at the facility with the visitors, but then also within the community as well, why this is important. And then the one there with the raccoon is we also have to keep in mind that some of these critters, if they get an AIS from our neighboring water, and they could potentially bring it into our facility. So how do we protect that? And then the one thing too is, and I've briefly talked about what we did with the walleye trials, but moving forward, we really need to look at what we could do for a cool and warm water facility, and that's going to eliminate that AIS risk from importation. We would have our own cool and warm water sources that we could satisfy the requirements. And one thing is right now is when we go get cool and warm water fish, we do it because they're extras or they have them ready. And sometimes that's not the best timing for us. So if we were to have our own facility, we could start to manage when is the right time to get those fish and what is the number that we actually could use. Like right now, we get about 1.1 million walleye from North Dakota. Well, they recently had an AIS and now we're down to about 900,000 we can get. Could we use that 1.1 million? For sure. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that. And that would give us a little bit more where we're steering the wheel on what we need to do when it comes to cool and warm water. Okay, well, that's the fish culture section, and I can take any questions.
Thank you, Guy. Wonderful. Robert.
Just two quick questions. What hybrid rainbow, what rainbow are we looking at to go next?
So Commission President Doobie, a member, Commissioner Roberts. So what we're looking at right now for rainbow trout is it's a West Virginia, they call it the West Virginia strain of rainbow. And actually the state of Utah had some brought in, and they're looking, and they've actually used it at their facilities for I think the last 4 or 5 years. And basically they have not had any cases of bacteria cold water disease, any outbreaks with this strain. And prior to that, they had lots of outbreaks, and that's why they looked elsewhere for this. And so this is a unique strain that's out of West Virginia originally. And then for us, what we plan to do is kind of try to do a side-by-side and do a marking of some fish, some rainbows, probably our fall rainbows, and then of this West Virginia strain, and then see how well these fish actually perform in the wild. Because again, just how they perform in the hatchery is nice, but ultimately we need to know that these fish are going to perform and be able to be caught by the fishermen and be able to do that.
And could you address what hybrids we're doing, like the tigers?
Yeah, in regards to hybrids, right now we're doing the tiger trout. So we're doing those up at Story. We're also doing splake. So, well, the tiger trout's a brown and a brook, a splake's a lake trout and a brook trout. And then we're also doing some tiger muskie at Spees. So those are the muskie and the northern pike, and we bring those into our Spees facility and then stock them.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, guys. And one thing too, I just really appreciate it. I just wanted to mention that thanks for everyone that's been, commissioners have been visiting the facilities out there. It means a lot to the personnel there at the hatcheries, and they really appreciate that. So thank you.
Mr. McBarnes.
Nesbitt, President Doobie, members of the commission, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I always treasure the opportunity to talk about the Wildlife Fund. For those of you who do not know me in the audience or online, my name is Chris McBarnes. I'm proud to be the president of the Wildlife Fund. If you don't know about the Wildlife Fund, get on our new website. We just launched it this past fall. Very proud of it, thewildlifefund.org. And we've also worked with software to make that website completely accessible to those with physical challenges. So if you have epilepsy or visual impairment, whatever it might be, there's software on that website to make it accessible to you. And I think that's important as organizations that we keep that in mind. We work hard to make sure our buildings are accessible, and our digital points of contact need to be accessible as well. Every time I stand before you, it's a huge challenge because I take my job very seriously, and in a short amount of time, I have to encapsulate the momentum, the progress, the promise of the Wildlife Fund, and that's very hard to do, but I'm going to try to do that here today. So as a quick preview, I want to give you an introduction of a fantastic new board member that we're bringing to the Wildlife Fund. I'm going to talk to you briefly about a search for an operations manager, a great gift announcement to the US 26 Du Bois Wildlife Crossing Project, and another check announcement that's going to help our moose population in Wyoming. So I think it speaks to the Wildlife Fund and the legacy that we're building in the professionalism of our organization, the type of people that we're attracting who want to put their name on this organization and see that it be successful. So we want to welcome Faith Hamlin. Faith's in her mid-20s. She's an absolute rock star in this state. You're going to hear more about Faith, I think, in many different areas of leadership in Wyoming. We're proud that we recruited her to the Wildlife Fund. She's a graduate of Colgate University, studied Middle Eastern studies, decided to come back to Wyoming to help her parents run and operate the Little Jenny Ranch, fully operational working cattle ranch in Bondurant. They also have an outfitting business there. They run snow machines. Faith has a business mind, loves the animals of Wyoming, and she's an avid outdoorsman. Loves to mountain climb, loves to get out and hunt. She's going to be a fantastic addition to our team. There on the right side of the screen, you'll see her and her dad, Mark Hamlin, out riding on the ranch. The Hamlins were kind enough to host one of our evenings of note this past fall. Great supporters of the Wildlife Fund. So welcome to Faith. Operations manager. I've been a crew of one since starting on March 9th of 2020. There's literally no amount of money you could give me to go back to March 9th of 2020. All the progress, all the work, all the travel, it's been extraordinary. I've loved every minute of it, don't get me wrong, but for this fund to realize the growth and the expectations that you all have for it to come to fruition, we simply need help. So this is a pivotal position. This will be my right-hand person working full-time, helping me develop strategic and tactical goals for the fund, aiding and helping oversee daily administrative needs for the fund, identifying, developing, and maintaining relationships with donors so that we can take this fund to the next level. If you're out there and you're interested, check it out on the Wildlife Fund Facebook page. We're on Indeed and the WYO Nonprofit Network job board. You can read that full job announcement. Reach out to us if you are interested. So US 26 Du Bois Wildlife Crossing Project, I-25, we're just about there, thanks to the leadership of Deputy Director Bruce and this commission. So the Wildlife Fund, we're pivoting to US 26 in Kimmerer. So this is a 33-mile segment from mileposts 40 to 73. Wildlife vehicle collisions accounted for 74% of crashes from 15 to 19 with an annual estimated cost of close to 800 grand. So consequently, it is one of the most dangerous and costly stretches in our state in regards to wildlife. All these numbers were taken from the US Highway 26 Wildlife Mitigation Strategy. So to kick off the fundraising effort, to start the path towards construction, we want to thank the 10-country chapter of the Muley Fanatic Foundation. We've been working hard with them, and we are helping facilitate a $50,000 gift to the US 26 project. And there on the right, because the Muley Fanatic Foundation is kicking us off, that's some migratory routes that the mule deer herds use around the Du Bois area. So there will definitely be an impact to migration. So we thank the Muley Fanatics. We're going to keep this fundraising effort going and knock out this crossing project, hopefully in the near future. Next, another exciting announcement that we have is help for moose. We all love moose. We know in portions of the state, the populations are struggling a little bit, so we want to give them all the help that they can get. We want to thank Mary Rumsey out of Matitsi. Thanks to Mary, we have a dedicated moose account within the Wildlife Fund for research and habitat work. She started us off with a gift of $15,000, and that's going to be granted to the Cody region, Jerry Altermat, for a beaver relocation trailer that will be used there and then transferred over to Sheridan, because we have a lot of beaver believers, as Jerry says, in Sheridan. Beavers do a ton of great habitat work, as you saw in Ian Tater's presentation. So if anyone out there would like to restrict a gift that's fully tax deductible to help moose in Wyoming, we have that ability now within the Wildlife Fund and would love to talk to you about that. So want to thank you all so much for your support. Would not be here without you. In short, the state of the Wildlife Fund, we do have a future that's very, very exciting. And it's my goal not to stop until we have an organization that's envied by other states that have similar organizations, and we're looked at as a model for how you do things. I think the potential is limitless and look forward to helping us realize that potential. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Very proud of what you've done for us.
Mr. President.
Gladwin?
Chris, how's your funding mechanism for your operations and stuff working? How's it looking for hiring the new operation manager and past that point?
Yeah, so, as we all know in the NGO world, there's a ton of great NGOs here today and across the state. The dollar to keep the lights on is always the hardest dollar to raise. If you were to tell me this time 2 years ago that I was here about to say what I'm about to say, I would have said then that I would have missed the mark in doing my job. After being in it for 2 years, I am damn proud of what this organization has done, and we've come a long way in a very, very short period of time. If you look at the I-25 project alone, I worked really hard with Deputy Director Bruce to make sure that $1.3 million from WWNRT was put into this project, another $400,000 of private funds. So on that project alone, that's a $1.7 million injection to that project that I believe if the Wildlife Fund wasn't here, that money would have to come from somewhere else. And that's just one project in our first year. We need help to get over this hump in the next year in regards to operations. And so I would ask the commission to consider helping us get over this hump. Now, here's the good thing. Here's the promise we have, and I want y'all to hear this. We're creating a track record now that people believe in us and they're investing in us to keep the lights on. So I'm not going to delve into details, but we're getting ready to announce a $350,000 match challenge that will be completely unrestricted for operating funds. So this year, we're going to set out on a warpath to get that $350,000 matched dollar for dollar, which at the start of next year, hopefully will result in $700,000 being in our bank account that's fully unrestricted for operating funds, which will be a great start to building the corpus that we need to sustain this organization. But I ask that the commission respectfully consider investing in us for one more year so that we can keep the lights on and keep this organization moving forward.
Mr. President, based on this presentation, I'd like to make a motion that we fund the Wildlife Fund because of the work they're doing for the state of Wyoming with some money out of the discretionary fund that we have. I'd like to recommend $250,000 as my motion.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Lagwood and seconded by Commissioner Byrd to authorize the Wildlife Fund for an additional funding of $250,000. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion on that? Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Was that before or after?
Thank you all so much for your belief in us, and I promise we will not let you down. Thank you.
Well, you do us proud, brother. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Mr. Edberg, for the last time, buddy.
It's an honor, pleasure to present this last presentation in my last presentation to the commission. It's an overview of our 2021 hunting season. It shows the hard work that our field folks do and the commission's doing in management of wildlife. With the new commissioners, we've done this every year. So we ask that you kick back, relax, and look at a lot of smiles around these hunters' faces. So, Well, it doesn't get any better than that. Special thanks go out to Parker Everhart, the Cheyenne office tech who put that together. B, who always assists with that. And of course, all our field folks are out there doing that hard work and submitting those pictures. And so I guess I'll just send it with, that is all. That is all.
Don't run away. Okay, we've got some blue sheets to get to. Mr. Harris?
President Doobie, commissioners, Director Nesvik, and staff. A couple of topics I'd like to cover real quickly with you today. I won't take a lot of your time, but I do want to talk about, I know a lot of you as a board member of the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation. I want to thank you all for your past cooperative working partnership with our organization. And we want to look forward to a real bright future. We have a couple of things in mind and we're working together. And I want to continue that partnership. So thank you very much for the commission and the department's partnership and cooperative working agreements we have. The other topic I want to talk to you about, most of you don't know that in my past life, one of them anyway, I was a commissioner just like yourselves in the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. One of the things we looked at a few years back, now I'm aging myself, was the decreasing demographics of people going into hunting by age. They actually were going downhill. We were very concerned about that because just like you, a lot of our funding or most of our funding came from hunting license and fishing licenses. So one of the things we want to do is look at opportunities to actually increase young people and families, and particularly women and young people coming into the hunting environment and actually enjoying it. We had a situation where we had tag transfers available for wounded veterans in the past, but we looked at saying, okay, as people and families are hunting, what about having a tag transfer from a father, mother, grandfather, or grandmother to a young person or a son, a daughter, a granddaughter, or a grandson under 18 years of age, and then having them be in the hunting camp with the person that transferred the tag. Did two things. One, it increased youth into the field if the tag transfer occurred. And it also included families being out there together, being involved in the sport of hunting. One of the things we found out, it was very successful for us in the state. It was just one more item that we had. And I'd like you to look at that and maybe consider it as part of the things and see if it might be something that we can effectively do now in Wyoming. I think I passed out or had them pass out a sheet for you that shows Arizona's regulations. And just so most of you know, I grew up in Wheatland. I still live in Wheatland, Wyoming. I came back after a number of years of being gone, and I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my life in Wyoming. So this is extremely important to me, make sure that we continue our hunting heritage here. I'll stand for any questions now or in the future, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions for John?
Thank you very much.
We have it. I'm sure we'll look into it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else with a blue sheet? I'll get you in a second. Anybody else regarding business or anything else anybody wants to say? Now or forever hold your peace. Okay, Mr. Gillen.
I always have to bend over at this thing. President Doobie, Commissioners, Director Nesvik, it's my honor today to be appointed and asked to speak
to you today about the great career of Scott Edberg and what that's meant to the outfitting industry. So when we gather and we talk about Game and Fish or its employees, there's two words that always come up when Scott's name comes up, and that's respect and admiration. I'm gonna give you a little example. In my career, my career has been intertwined with Scott's for over 30 years. So about 30 years ago, when Scott was a young game warden, he was in the Glenrock district. And at that time, if you think back to for those of you who were around then, the relationship between the outfitting industry and the Wyoming Game and Fish was less than ideal, confrontational, adversarial, and multiple other adjectives. I'm gonna give you an example of how that has changed, and it started in my mind with Scott Edberg as being one of the leaders that helped to create the relationship we enjoy today. So Scott was a young game warden in Glenrock. He came out to one of my hunting camps, and I was young then too. I was about 35 at the time, so this is quite a while ago. Scott would make a point of coming out to the camp when the new hunters arrived in camp, and he would talk to them, meet them, answer their questions, hang out with us for a couple hours and build a relationship. It was actually the first time he did that. It was a little disconcerting because of that relationship, but I learned real quick that Scott was a very genuine person, and he was there to basically to answer these non-resident hunters' questions and just build that relationship from the very get-go. And Scott has continued that through his entire career. So when the outfitters get together and we talk about Scott Edberg, the word respect comes up every time. The other word that comes up is admiration. And those of you who know Scott know there is no person on the planet that has ever worked harder. Most of my conversations with Scott are always at 6:30 in the morning, and I'm barely awake, and he's been awake for an hour. He's been in the office for an hour, and 2 hours. Okay. And they're just unbelievable, the work ethic he has. And I would hate to even imagine, how many times he violated the Fair Labor and Standards Act. He probably doesn't even know how to spell that, but so we are losing, and we've dreaded this day. Our members of the Wyoming Outfitter and Guides Association have talked about this on numerous occasions, that how big of a hole we're going to have in our relationship between the Wyoming Game and Fish and the industry with the loss of Scott. And we know he's not going away, but he was definitely a pathfinder when it came to building that relationship. So we plan on having a more significant goodbye, Scott, at our convention. But in the meantime, I know we're not supposed to do this anymore, but Rob Shaw, in case you're watching, you can kiss my ass, because we're going to buy Scott dinner. Spielberg, here's you.
Thanks, Ian. It's been a great time working with the outfitters, like we work with everybody, and it goes across the board for our landowners, our sportsmen, our ranchers, farmers, and everything. So that's what it's all about. So yeah, really appreciate that. Those kind words.
We're getting close to being done torturing you today, buddy. That's true. And for those of you that don't know, a blue tub day is a bad day in Game and Fish. Blue tub usually means that unexpectedly you won't be there at the end of the day anymore. So no, it's not a blue tub day. It's actually a celebration for an absolutely incredible career. I had some opportunities last night to talk about Scott. I'm gonna take some more here today in front of the public to talk about really what a mark this professional has had on not just the agency, but the entire state of Wyoming. He has really had a major role in preserving the culture, the history, the traditions of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And actually, as Cy just really illustrated well and kind of led into this, he's actually made a lot of those components of our culture that are so near and dear to our hearts even better, because he's helped build relationships where maybe 30 years ago we didn't have such good relationships. So tremendously dedicated employee, a lot of passion. You've all seen that. Cares so much about this agency. He wears the red shirt on his last day because that's how he came into the agency. He's wearing a red shirt, and he really takes pride, as much as anybody I know, in being able to wear that red shirt and represent this great agency. You know, I could talk for a very long time about Scott's career and what he's done. We've all heard he started as a game warden in Glen Rock back in 1991. He very quickly became well respected by his peers. And at that time, there was a lot of new folks that came in there. We kind of went through these peaks and valleys with bringing in new wardens into the force. And he came in, I think, with about 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6, if you look at a 2-year period there. And very quickly, Scott was identified as one of those guys that was really going to do great things and was going to fit in well with the culture in Wyoming. And he wasn't from here. He came from out east, and he came to Wyoming with the goal of making this the place he wanted to build a career. And 31 years later, end up where he is right now. And he became so important to the agency. He has had a lot of involvement over the years in our new employees. He takes a lot of pride in the people that work in the field. And even when he was one of those guys that was working in the field, he invested a lot of his time and his energy into developing our new people. He wanted to make sure that they understood what it really meant to be a Wyoming game warden, and what it really meant, and why Wyoming was unique. And Wyoming is unique. Wyoming has a different model than any other state. And Scott embraced that and was a model for what that really looks like across our nation. Scott worked in the field a long time. He moved out to Pinedale. We heard about that a little bit last night. He spent some time learning a completely different side of the state, learning a whole new set of issues. Was a supervisor at that point, a first line supervisor for game wardens, not a regional supervisor. But he really spent that time to learn a whole new set of issues, build a whole bunch more relationships before he came back and was promoted to be the Casper regional supervisor. He took that on at a time when, just like today, there was no shortage of issues in Casper or any other part of the state. And one of the things that I remember when Scott first went to be a supervisor, I was still out in the field at that time, I think. What year did you go to be a supervisor? Casper. I was still out in the field at that time doing really cool stuff. And Scott very quickly was one of those go-to guys. People would kind of laugh. He got put on every committee. And the reason was because he was good and he was enthusiastic and he had that work ethic that Cy talked about. And he was a get her done guy. And so he got voluntold. He usually volunteered for about every committee. And so he got to work on issues across the whole state. And that really set him up well to be able to move to the position that he took after that, where he was responsible at a statewide level. Early on, he was involved in a lot of the disease issues that he still is today. When he went out to Pinedale, he learned lots about brucellosis. I don't know if it served him well or not, but he ended up, that followed him to Casper, and he still got to work with a lot of brucellosis issues after he got in the position he's in now. You know, he's been a key leader on the initiative that you heard about from John Lund this morning. The person that was leading that until now was Scott Edberg, and he took what seemed like sometimes an unsurmountable challenge to bring this issue out in front of a lot of people and talk about it and do the hard thing. He took that and made it happen. And it would not have happened without Scott. He's done an exceptional job with that. He had an interest early on when he first promoted to the job he's in now of being engaged at the national level. He and I both, we got put on the steering committee for the National Association of Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs to look at issues across the entire country, and then also to develop a national leadership academy for conservation law enforcement officers. And we really cherish that opportunity together because we got to spend time away from the state, hanging out in really cool places like South Carolina, eating a lot of food, a lot of Southern food. We learned what a shrimp boil was. And but really what was neat for Scott is he and I both had an opportunity to see nationwide what other states, kind of how they had it. And it really gave us some perspective on Wyoming and how really the model that he has worked so hard to preserve in Wyoming was the right one for Wyoming. And we didn't want it to go a different way. And that was a reaffirmation of that when we had those opportunities at the national level. He's known as somebody who at any time, anybody in the agency can call up and talk to, and they're going to get the straight answer. There's not going to be any BS. There's not going to be beating around the bush. They're going to get it straight from Scott, good, bad, or ugly. And but at the end of the day, if it's ugly, he's going to be the guy that's going to try to help you figure it out and how to make it so it's good. And if I was to just sum up, you know, a person is defined a lot by what they do in their job and what they do at home. But at the end of the day, outside of the things that you choose to do as a career or the choices you make for where you live and your family and those kind of things, they're important, but really, you know, you're defined by your character. And Scott's character is above reproach. He is a man of honor, integrity, respected. Cy talked about that. You would hear if we asked conservation leaders from across the state to talk about Scott, you'd hear a lot of those same words because he's got character, and he's got character that I've always been very proud of because others look up to him and want to emulate his actions, his behavior. They want to be like Scott. And that's what a leader is. And so, you know, when Scotty walks away from here, he will have his head held high knowing that he has really left a mark and done great things for the agency. He's done great things for me personally. He's done great things for literally hundreds of people that are here now in this agency and that have gone and done the same thing as Scott and retired. So Scotty, we wish you absolutely the best. I look forward to meeting you in Glendo for fishing trips. I look forward to you sending us fishing and hunting pictures.
Maybe see some pictures.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool if next year when we do this, Dan, I hope you took some notes. Yeah. We have some pictures of Scotty with big kokanee, big walleye, and maybe a white-tailed deer, maybe a cow elk. I don't know, but anyway. We have a letter that I'll put in an envelope for you here, Scotty. And we also, the state of Wyoming is, they let you have what we used to call an urn. I think it was supposed to be a vase, but anyway, they changed that recently, and you could actually get one of these cool little boxes from the state that has, I don't know what you use it for. Scotty will find a use. Maybe he'll put elk teeth in it from the elk he harvests. But it's got an elk on the front, nice little box on the inside. It's got Scott Edberg presented upon your retirement and grateful recognition for 32 years of service to the state and Game and Fish Department, February 1, 2022. And then in addition to that aside, we've got a plaque with the same thing. It's got his dates of service on it. And hopefully he's going to find a good place to put that, maybe by the box. And congratulations, buddy. You've earned retirement. And I thank you for your professionalism, your service, and your friendship.
Thank you very much. A great run. And I wouldn't change it. Hey, I appreciate everybody's support. And I'll be around. But I really want to thank my family, PJ, my wife, and the kids. They gave a lot of sacrifices for me to complete what I did. But without them, that would never be successful. It's true. Behind every good man, there's a great woman and a great family. So hats off to them.
Hey.
Scott, I hope I can get through this, but you know, when you become a commissioner, you don't know anybody. You don't know anybody on the commission. You don't know anybody in headquarters, and you don't know where to fit in. You don't know where you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be part of. And I remember you like a long lost friend, a buddy. Come in, have a beer with us. And I appreciate that because it makes a big difference, huge difference, because we're a team. And you got to start one step at a time. But when you come in, total outsider, a lot of people were the same way in the department, but it's your day today. And I just wanted to thank you. Okay, is there no other comments, or I don't know if anybody wants to follow that. But, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Jolovich, second by Commissioner Ladwood to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.